Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution. Mexico don't want your kind in their country, you stinking gringo. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform. Y'all salute, family. You know we got to get into this now. The news, why they not talking about this all over the news? Violence breaks out in Mexico as they don't want Americans. They don't want you in their country. Go home. That's what they're saying.
Protested Mexico against American migrants, and it turned violent where they start attacking American businesses.
African Americans are not the reason why Mexico is experiencing a gentrification crisis.
Don't get me wrong. The United States of America is still the land of opportunity. Many people would love to become American citizens and take advantage of everything that America has to offer. But while many people want to come to America, there are many people who are Americans who want to live other places. And the reason why that's the case is because America has gotten expensive. If you can hold on to the United States dollar and it follows you, you can live a quality of life at about a fraction of the cost. Let's say if you live in Colombia or Thailand, everything is almost like 75% off. I used to live in Poland, and that is absolutely true. The healthcare in these countries, it's almost as good as America at almost half the price. And then your quality of life is better. But while we're moving to these places, do we ever think about what the locals are going through? Many Americans, especially Black Americans, are looking for opportunities abroad. Many are looking to escape the racism that they felt in America. And one of the new places they're going to is Mexico.
You know what, the truth of the matter is, I felt my safest self. And safe is relative, but I mean safe to be my authentic self, safe to express myself in the way that I really desire to express myself. That feeling of safeness, I've only felt outside of the United States. And me living in Mexico as an African-American woman, I've never felt discrimination from the Mexican people. When I have felt discrimination, it's been from Americans.
Let's take this lady for an example. She's a family of 4 and they're enjoying their time in Mexico. Everything is getting better for them. Even look at the comment here. Somebody says, Mexico, is it cheap to live there? Travel Queen, the poster of that video, says way cheaper than the USA. Damn. And while this lady is able to live and work at America and earn US dollars, on the flip side, Mexicans that are in Mexico are facing hardships. And it's not just Black Americans, because many Americans are there, but I'm just focusing on the Black Americans in Mexico. Mexicans are tired of these Americans simply because they're driving the prices up too high. And because the prices are going up so high, this is starting to happen.
Yesterday, 4th of July, they had a protest in Mexico against American migrants, and it turned violent where they start attacking American businesses.
Shout out to my man Donnie on Timeout on TikTok. He's really covering a lot of the legal immigration that's going on in America. And he also talked about this. If you guys don't know, on July 4th, Hispanics in Mexico basically went around tearing up a whole bunch of American businesses. And the reason why that's the case, they blame American expats for coming into the country and basically...
Now imagine that wasn't all over the news. Why didn't they show that all over the news? That in Mexico, they were attacking American businesses, trashing their businesses, saying get the hell out their country, and threatening Americans with violence in Mexico. They can't hide this. That's exactly what they were doing.
Gentrifying the country. And this is making it very expensive for the local people. This is the same thing that you hear about in Ghana when Black Americans are coming there and local Ghanaians are saying things are starting to become costly. The locals can't get the things they used to do. Yet the people who are building homes and apartment buildings are looking to cater towards, this group of people who are building businesses and doing better. But watch what he says after this.
So their complaints against the American migrants is gentrification. They're draining the resources of Mexico. Here's one.
That's what we
Americans in Mexico should learn Spanish. Americans in Mexico should learn Spanish.
They say they draining. They say you Americans is draining their resources, and you need to learn Spanish if you're gonna be. I was like, did I wake up in Alice in Wonderland? This can't be real. And it was too good to be true. The news won't cover it. The Mexicans in Mexico say your ass need to learn how to speak Spanish if you're gonna be there. At least learn how to speak Spanish. Wow, they actually said that. And they say you're a leech in their country and you're draining their resources. Wow.
Spanish.
But that's racist now, if you say that in America, but they're saying it in Mexico.
When America expressed these same concerns, Americans are the villains, or have phobias. Oh, you shouldn't say that. But when Mexico says this, is long live Mexico, we support Mexico. And if you look at the numbers, there's over 10 million plus Mexican immigrants in the United States. 4 million of them live in Southern California, and a high percentage of them is receiving some form of government assistance. Let's not talk about Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid. That's California versions of Medicaid.
Now, he brings up an interesting point. He's saying, listen, a lot of these Hispanics in Mexico are upset, but these Mexicans that come to America, I mean, look at what they're doing. These Mexicans are basically getting a free ride. Some of them are using Medicaid, which is free health insurance, which is using taxpayers. And if you're in California, it's Medi-Cal. And then Mexicans who are there illegally or legally are then taking opportunities from Americans. But then check out this lady who's a Hispanic complaining about Americans living in Mexico.
Gentrification is when you bring money from your country into a different country. You raise up the prices of everything because you're buying top-notch houses, you're building businesses, you're trying to basically push people that have lived in that.
Ma'am, don't preach it to the choir. Don't you dare tell us what gentrification is. Who the hell you think you're talking to? So, see, nobody gave a damn when we were preaching about gentrification. It's always make your community better. We said, man, y'all pricing us out. We can't even live in these communities anymore. Lady, you didn't speak up on our behalf. You didn't give a shit. You're getting a taste of your own goddamn medicine. Now you won't complain.
That area out of there because you're making everything too expensive. And at the same time, you're going around complaining about the locals and the culture, people being up too late, making noise near your new condo that you bought in your retirement in Mexico. And I think we're going to see more of this. We're going to see more people in Mexico fighting back, pushing back against people in America, whether they're well-intended or not, coming in and doing so. Because if you're going to go into another country, as you guys like to say, you got to assimilate, you got to learn the culture. But for some reason, Americans think that they're the exception. They could go to these places, make their own areas.
But let's go back to my man Donnie on timeout.
What? This can't be true. This is like a skit. This is a Saturday Night Live skit. Are they pranking me? Am I running some prank content? Huh? Did that lady just say, but did we like to go to that country and make our own sections? Not assimilate, try to bring our ways over there. Oh my goodness, the pot calling the kettle black.
What does he say about gentrification?
We want to discuss gentrification. Try finding a place in Los Angeles or Southern California, especially if it's a lot where they're saturated at, where it's predominantly them. Even if you could afford the rent, most likely they're not going to rent to you. And it'd be like 8 to 10 of them living in a 1-bedroom apartment. When in Los Angeles, it's supposed to only be 3 people to a 1-bedroom apartment. If you try to do that as an American, you will get reported. Now, the Americans that live in Mexico, you got to show proof that you're bringing in $2,600, at least $2,600 a month. So you're showing them you're not going to live off their government. If you don't have that, you have to have $43,000 in the bank to even go over there.
Now, remember, he says, hey, these Americans that are coming to Mexico, they've done everything right. They have at least $40,000 in their bank account. They're making at least $2,600 a month. And then if you want to talk about gentrification, there are certain neighborhoods that used to be completely black. Like I remember when Compton College was pretty much all black. I went to Compton College, and now Compton College, the last I checked when I was a student, I saw so many Hispanics there. Hispanics are running blacks out of these same places in California, and sometimes they're living like, 10 or 9 in a house. But if that was Black Americans or any other Americans, that would be a problem, right? So we're talking about gentrification. I mean, I used to live on 112th Street in Watts, East 112th Street. And I can tell you then that the Hispanics came in and they basically took over Black Watts. All right. I used to live across the street from Grape Street Elementary School. And that was in the 80s, this was happening. And now Mexican stores are everywhere. Can blacks get jobs at these Hispanic shops? Hell to the no. All right. But it's okay for Hispanics to do that. Now, I also want to tell you something else. Not only are Hispanics upset at Americans, are Black Americans who are moving into Mexico, but check this out.
This is what an anti-migrant protest looks like in Mexico. There's anger and waving of Mexican flags and signs like this one, which translates to "No to the invasion." Now a new poll by the Washington Post and the leading Mexican newspaper, Reforma,
so
suggests
the Mexicans say it's an invasion. You're invading their country, stinking migrants, and you gringos bringing down the economy, sucking up the resources. You won't even learn to speak Spanish. They say it's an invasion. Do CNN hear this? How about MSNBC? Do they hear what they're saying in Mexico?
attitudes in Mexico may have hardened since this protest last November over the arrival of a migrant caravan in Tijuana. 64% of Mexicans, nearly 2/3, say they believe people fleeing Central America into Mexico are a burden that threatens to take jobs and benefits from Mexican citizens. 55% want them deported versus just 33% who believe Mexico should give them temporary
majority of the Mexicans want them deported. The majority of the Mexicans want their own Latin American brothers. See the scam they run on us? They want their own Latin American brethren thrown out their country. They say they're taking Mexican jobs from good Mexican, good Mexican people. And they push them into America. And then they say it's racist. If you repeat what they're saying in America, that's crazy. They say it's racist. That is racist. Even the Mexicans are saying it's racist. That's racist. You hate Spanish people. You just told the people the same motherfucking thing in Mexico. Man, the gig is up. No more of that BS.
Asylum or residency. Just 7% support them settling permanently. So Mexico is seeing some of the same nationalist sentiments that we've seen in the United States and other countries.
Remember the video I did about the Haitian community fighting back against ICE in Brooklyn?
News won't tell us that. They won't make us feel bad, but we don't give a fuck no more. We stand up for our goddamn self. We will not be displaced in society. They will not tell the world what's going on in Mexico right now because it will bust a scam that they running over here. All hell. Not only are they kicking out any immigrants saying get the hell out for the same reasons we saying, but they're also telling Americans who went over there legally. Now, they imagine we saying, okay, if you came over here the right way, we don't have nothing to say about that. We're just talking about the illegals. That's not what they saying in Mexico. They saying even if you came the right way, get the hell out. They don't want you over there. Imagine that.
Yeah, Hispanics were like joining forces with Haitians. Oh, we need to take from them and fight back from them. Like, this is crazy. Like, we need to also unite with our Haitians, against ICE. But at the same time, Central Americans who are looking to get into Mexico, they don't want them there. Why? Because they're saying the same thing Americans are saying. They're saying, listen, we can't deal with Central Americans coming and taking jobs from us. And over 55% of Mexicans in Mexico don't want Central Americans. These are people who also speak Spanish, people who are culturally similar to them. They want nothing to do with them. And then now for the blacks coming into Mexico, they're understanding this.
So I'm moving to Mexico City in about 8 weeks, and I'm already getting comments from people telling me either not to move there or telling me that I'm contributing to gentrification by relocating. I'm sorry, but I think that is complete and utter bullshit. African Americans are not the reason why Mexico is experiencing a gentrification crisis, first of all. I think it's really interesting that people expect African Americans specifically to stay in a country where our ancestors were enslaved. I'm a Black girl from the South, so I know for a fact that my ancestors were not only enslaved in this country, but they were probably enslaved not very far from where I live. I think Black Americans specifically have always been expected to stay and tough it out in a country that has literally taken so much from us. Our current sitting president didn't even acknowledge Juneteenth. And you expect me to either stay in this country or go back to Africa. Insanity. I've been to Mexico and everybody was super kind and super welcoming. There's also Black Latinos, there's Black Mexicans. So there is a demographic of Black folks in the country already. And especially as a Black woman, we don't even have the resources to gentrify a country. That's another demographic of people, no shade. And while I will totally be respectful and intentional about my move to Mexico, I do not think it's fair to tell people, especially Black folks, that they're not welcome in a country when the original country that they're from treats them like shit.
Now listen to what the sister is saying. She's saying like, wait a minute, I'm coming over to Mexico and you guys are already accusing me of gentrifying the place. Like, hey, listen, I come from a country that's hated on me, but I'm trying to come over there and live my best life. And, you're blaming me. What she doesn't understand is Mexicans don't care about that. Even though she's a Black American, she's not going to be different. You're an American, just like me, living in Uganda. I'm not considered necessarily African or Black here. I'm considered a white person. I'm also considered Muzungu because I represent the lifestyle of somebody in the Western world. And so when a Hispanic or African, and for that matter, sees somebody like me, hey, it's going to be a little bit easier to say, hey, you're a foreigner and you're one of the reasons why things are getting higher for us. But check out this sister who also lives in Mexico.
I completely agree with this statement. People are always wondering if I experienced racism in Mexico, but to be honest, I feel like I observed classism more than anything. Like, I personally haven't had a racist experience, but the classism is real here. It really is. Like, and you can just see the drastic difference between like rich Mexicans and your average everyday working people Mexican. Like, it's so in your face. And I see a lot of rich Mexicans, a lot. And they definitely have like this air of, like.
Now she said something pretty interesting. She says she notices that there's a lot of classism in Mexico and not much racism, but the rich Hispanics, they have this particular aura about them. And that's interesting because a lot of the developers who are rich are catering to who? Other people that have money. You see, here's what we're not talking about in the third world. And I can talk about it from living in Uganda. I was recently in Kenya. These new apartments that people are building, and also how I'm going to tell you the same thing. When you look at the prices of these apartments, when you look at what these developers want and the amount of money they want, they're not trying to sell to locals. And the reason why they don't want to sell to locals is because they believe there's no money to be gained by dealing with locals. All right. Everybody's looking to cater towards people who will be working for foreign nationals, bringing business or bringing opportunities, who can pay more taxes to the government. And that's the government's fault. But at the same time, these same Hispanics who don't want anybody else to come in want it to be very difficult for Americans, and even Black Americans, to come there. And see, the reality is, if you're going to protest American brands, then you know what? What if America starts protesting Mexico? And this is the hypocrisy of almost every immigrant that I've come across, whether it's here in Uganda or someplace else. Again, I've been in countless debates with Ugandans or Rwandese people who have a problem with African Americans getting citizenship in the African country, but they don't have no issue with their people getting citizenship in America. And you wonder why people like this sound hypocritical AF. All right. So guys, what do you think? It's your boy Usher Jackson back at it again for the
broke out across Mexico and other major cities protesting against foreigners. That's right, foreigners to Mexico. U.S. citizens and others coming to their country and get this, folks, using up the resources. Yeah, see, they're protesting because Americans are doing what they've been doing for 100 years. Coming in the country, using up resources, sending the money back to another country, taking up jobs, taking up living space, making the rent go sky high. Protesters in Mexico City, particularly neighborhoods like Condesa and Roma, have expressed significant grievances against the influx of U.S. citizens and other foreign digital nomads. Tim Black, what is a digital nomad? See, a digital nomad is somebody who moves around. It's sort of like a teleworker. Somebody can work remotely, but they tend not to give a damn where they live. 6 months they live in France, then they go to Switzerland, then they go to Mexico, then they go somewhere else where they just keep bouncing around. They have no ties to the places they live. Digital nomads, these non-Mexican citizens, are gentrifying and raising rents. That's knocking asses out of jobs and out of housing because they got to stay somewhere. And they're willing to pay more than the native people will pay because they can afford it. Hold on. Gringo, go home. Get up out of Mexico. Yeah, this is amazing, man. Democrats would not be talking about this story. Nah, the liberals won't be talking about this one because, see, this goes against the narratives. Yeah, so let me get this right. When they come to America, they get treated special. We get them all types of food cards and housing and shelters and vaccinations and anything they need because they come in here to help us. But when we go over there, get out of here. Get out of here. Get your gringo ass out of here. That's reality. Yeah, I don't think Rachel Maddow will be reporting on this. I don't think Don Lemon and Joanne Reed will be reporting on this. They tell black people are selfish, but try to keep the little nickels we got that we can rub together in our pocket for our kids. But no one says that about Mexicans acting the exact same way, because you know what, folks? It is only natural to protect what is yours to the best of your ability, particularly if you lack the flexibility financially to be able to withstand what's going on. Very much understood. Obviously, this is having a negative impact on those people, and these people are concerned. They have a right to be concerned. I support the Mexicans who are fighting to keep their neighborhoods, who are fighting to stave off colonialism or gentrification in their own land. Why is it that these liberals who want to take advantage of these Mexicans, not because they give a damn about them, but because they want to exploit them for their work? They want to exploit them as an underclass, take advantage of them, and also work towards, they also get support from the corporations who want to drive down wages. So that's the difference. We're not driving down the cost of labor, but we are driving up the cost of living and housing and other resources. And there's only so many nice cribs. Pay taxes, speak Spanish. We can't tell them that. When we say this, when we say speak English, we are being xenophobic. Can Mexicans be xenophobic? Imagine telling a black person you're xenophobic. They got their own country, their own language. And you're trying to say somehow black people are denying them access to something. And over here in Mexico, if we as an Americans go to Mexico, they like, get out of our country, gringo. Speak Spanish and get out. Yo, if we say that to Mexicans, the Mexicans, that live here probably don't give a shit. They probably feel the same way. But the liberals, they'll come for our necks. Oh, they try to get us knocked out of our jobs. They're trying to ruin our lives. They're trying to dox us. They want to shame us publicly. Yeah, publicly shame us for saying what Mexicans would say to us. That are saying, not only are they saying it, they putting that shit on signs with no mask on their face. You understand what I'm saying? I want everybody to take a long, hard look at this segment. This segment should go super duper viral.
The reason we've gathered here is precisely to hear the thoughts of many victims, mainly young people today for whom it's almost impossible to live, to find housing. It's not just that. We're living the consequences of gentrification, which is the government directing its public policies towards people with higher purchasing power, often illegally displacing local populations who have lived in these neighborhoods for 40, 50, and we have documented cases of up to 60 years. The main issues are precisely the rising rent costs, which is the only housing model the government provides. In 5 years, rents have increased by 47%. This is violent for the local population. We are debating whether to pay for electricity, water, or food. Of course, we choose to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. They got their own version of Antifa. What? My God. They're upset and they're fighting for resources, Johnson. They're light-skinned. In America, man. America's got problems, Oz. We got problems.
Sus precios y desplazar a los mexicanos.
Oh my goodness, Johnson. Did that say kill a gringo? I'm a gringo. Yeah, I've been complaining about what's going on here in the deportation system, and Joe Biden is letting in 10 to 12 million unchecked, unfettered immigrants. I never said CILL, my landlord. Hello, waiting on a response from the former people I used to know, the progressives. Waiting on you guys to have a retort. What's the retort?
Tierras.
Yeah.
Stricter housing and tourism regulations. Demonstrators spoke out against wealthy digital nomads driving up prices. Man, isn't that something? Oh, man. We need to work together. Look, Mexico. Mexican citizens who are upset. We need to work together. Yeah, man, let's put our hands together. We can come up with a solution that benefits us both. How about you stay in your country and we stay in ours? Yeah, well, what? Who told you that? Who told you this wasn't my country? Those are sellout Democrats. Now, my people worked hard as hell to build this country, sometimes without even getting a paycheck. No pay. Slaves didn't have paychecks. So that's working harder than you were when you came over here. Listen, don't worry. I know they lied. Listen, I'm an American, and I can cut a deal with you. Your people stay where you are, we'll stay where we are. You don't drive down the cost of work for us, and we won't drive up the prices of housing where you live. I'm saying, mi amigo. So you see how simple that is? Trump, make that deal today. Make that deal, because for some reason, the Democrats are no interested. And you know what, guys? I had to say this. I don't think Trump's all that interested either. He's talking about giving all types of breaks to the farmers and yada, 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 yada. He's starting to sound a little bit like Jasmine Crockett. He's starting to sound a little bit like Jasmine Crockett. Yeah, he's taking a bite out of his bite. But I don't know. We'll see. But that's the deal we need to get done. Because as they vilify people like me, Tim Black, fighting for Black Americans at the bottom of our system, 40% of the homeless rate, 13% of the population, some say 14, 50% of homeless families, Black Americans. Still only a tenth of the wealth of white Americans. And you say for us, in fact, man, when I read off the figures, when we start looking at the actual numbers about how some Black Americans are doing right now, it's unconscionable that there would be Black Americans that have a problem with anything I say on this issue. It shows the elitism and the betrayal of poor Black Americans for the benefit of the Democratic Party. Because there is no way any other group of people would feel that way whose demographics look the way ours look. You understand what I'm saying? It's impossible. You would never see a Mexican American in Mexico who's at the bottom, whose people are struggling, who would support the influx of these people without visas. Well, yeah, we wouldn't see it. But we see Black Americans who are not ignorant, who have degrees, who have time to look up this stuff, who work for networks, who would actually dump on me, would actually try to blackball me out of expanding my little platform. Because I take this side of politics on this issue. And they know in their heart of hearts I'm right. They know I got a point, but the problem is the people that I'm advocating for are poor people and working class people and middle class people, and they don't have the power in this country. Yeah, folks, I want you to understand the only sellouts are not the Hodge twins, Candace Owens, and Jesse Lee Peterson. No. We got some other sellouts you need to be more concerned with, because by and large, most Black people don't pay them no mind. Their audiences are white people. You understand what I'm saying? The true culprits, fam, are the Black people that got influence over Black people. And if you're a Black person, you wake up in the morning and you take Hodge twins as a true advocate or a person or a group of people that actually direct your politics, you are a moron. Okay? So they're not influencing loads and, groups of Black Americans. So the people that I'm talking, the people that I go after are the people that have the influence. They're the Al Sharptons, Jamal Bryants, the Joy Ann Reeds, the Don Lemonheads. These are the people that had influence, and some still have it, over the Black community. Large swaths of Black Americans. Those are the people in my crosshairs. And damn it, I'm right. And I will continue this good work. I will continue it until something changes. And you know what? Time is on my side. Yes, it is. The only reason why I'm able to talk like this freely It's because of you. Become a member of the Tim Black Show. Go to jointimblack.com.
So therefore,
Gente que viene de otros países, en su mayoría extranjeros, a querer imponer su cultura, sus precios y desplazar a los mexicanos, a los nativos de estas tierras.
Porque la gentrificación solo es un paso más a la colonización, a los despojos y a que exploten nuestros recursos.
Tema anticapitalista, antipatriarcal, anticlasista, proletario.
Boy. So we got to talk about a fascinating story out of Mexico City, because you have protesters who have taken to the streets. They are rioting over Americans, over 1 million Americans moving to Mexico. They're saying, we don't want gringos in our country anymore. We want you to leave because you are driving up rents, you are displacing residents, and you also don't speak Spanish, right? So they're mad, they're upset, and they're telling the gringos to leave, to go back home, okay? And they're quite literally rioting in the streets and threatening, right? Threatening to commit acts of violence against gringos if they don't leave, okay? AKA Americans. So I want to talk about this because, again, I find stories like this to be fascinating. What I find to be even more fascinating is the complete and total silence from the left, who, for whatever reason...
This story was covered on Al Jazeera. Everybody who using this story had to go to Al Jazeera English to get this story. Why? Because NBC, ABC, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox didn't cover what the hell was going on in Mexico.
It doesn't believe that it's okay for Americans to make some of the same demands that these people are making in their country, right? But are going to stand silent as Americans potentially face harm and danger from people in Mexico who, you know, again, if this was the United States of America, they would say that this is racist, okay? That you can't do this, this isn't right. But all of a sudden, they don't really have much to say about this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and listen to this clip of these people complaining about the American gringos.
These protesters in Mexico City say cross-border migration is changing their country's capital for the worse. Over the last decade, an influx of mostly American, so-called digital nomads, have moved here to work remotely and also enjoy a cheaper cost of living. Protesters say the newcomers have driven up rents beyond the reach of locals.
If they're going to live in a country, they have to contribute to that country. The first and simplest issue is legal migration. They come here with visas or no visas, and still the change in purchasing power generates these problems of gentrification and displacement.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? I'm consistent on this, in the sense that I think that these people have some legitimate points, right? Because ultimately, as a digital nomad, when you move to some of these other countries, it's not like you're really producing anything, right? You're mainly making your money from online or selling to people in America, and then you turn around and you spend that money in another country, but yet again, you're not really producing anything of value in that country. And ultimately what that kind of leads to is just driving.
The point is that they fucking hypocrites, that they are fucking hypocrites, that they got the audacity to talk to us like this. But when we say the same thing, not because we racist, because we want to survive, we want our children and our grandchildren to survive, then we hit with all the political BS about how racist we are. That's crazy. And they're not saying in Mexico, oh no, the blacks can stay. No, Americans, all y'all get the hell out. And they're not saying, oh no, they want the illegal immigrants to go. No, they say everybody. They don't want no Americans staying there. You can bring your money. Oh, they don't have no problem with that. They didn't say you couldn't come visit and spend your money. They say you can't. They don't want you living there. You're making it bad for them. That's why the news don't want to cover this story, because it's going to blow their whole BS scam they've been pulling over here far too long. And the craziest part about it is shame on Mexico not want no other Latin American nations to be able to stay in their country. That's crazy. They don't want no other Spanish-speaking people. That go to show you we right. Oh, you don't want your Spanish-speaking brother, all of the raza and all of that go out the window when they get to politicking.
Driving up the price of things because you drive up demand, but you're not contributing to supply, right? You're not contributing to actual productions or real goods and services being produced from being a digital nomad, right? Because again, your main customer base is not in the country that you're in. Again, it's in the United States of America. So I totally understand where they're coming from. I'm not gonna be a hypocrite on this, right? If they say that, hey, we don't want you here, right? That you got to leave, okay, because you're distorting our economy. Hey, I feel the same way right here in America when it comes to a lot of these people, right? A lot of people from these other countries, right? I feel the exact same way, right? And so, hey, I feel that way, and they can feel that way, and that's fine, right? That is totally fine. I've actually been to Mexico City. It's a nice city. Okay, I actually like it. I actually like Mexico, especially I like the food, right? I like the food. I like the culture, right? Especially some of the more indigenous aspects, the pyramids and stuff like that. I think it's a cool place to visit, but I'm not going to go and live there, right? I'm not going to be staying there permanently. When I was there for like 5 or 6 days, I was like, bro, I can't wait to get up out of here because, being in a country like that, yeah, you got to be on your P's and Q's, right? You got to have your head on a swivel. You got these random people coming up to your car looking for gringos, right? Looking for people.
There's more beheadings and more bodies getting chopped up and dumped in barrels of acid in Mexico than in any terrorist country in this world. You name it, it's more beheadings going on in Mexico than Afghanistan, more than Somalia. You name anywhere in the world you think terrorists is there doing outrageous shit. Boy, the cartel in Mexico is doing, they kidnapping whole busloads of children and killing them, and they find the bodies, mass graves with hundreds of school kids in them. That shit, they don't want to tell these stories. Oh, boy, you crazy. Yeah, you rolling the dice in Mexico. That's a fact. If the cartels say, oh, I'll fucking let them spend their money, it's all good. But when there's bullshit going on, the Americans getting hit and all that. They know that shit. You rolling the dice over there.
To try to take advantage of and stuff like that. So, I enjoyed it while I was there, but at the same time, it was short. It was quick. It was in and out, right? In and out. So, again, I like Mexico. I think Mexico is a country that, they have their own issues. And if they don't want Americans there, that's cool, right? That's cool. Okay. And again, I don't blame them. I don't blame them. I'm just saying that the hypocrisy here, in my opinion, is the people who believe that in America, we don't have the right to make those demands when it comes to foreigners coming into our country. Like, for example, to demand that they learn English, right? Or, also not work under the table, which brings down the wages for American workers in the labor market that come in and that they demand housing, which drives up the cost of housing as well, too. So, yeah, we got some of the same issues in our country when it comes to foreigners. And, I'm one of these people that's like, hey, you got to go, right? You got to go. Okay, so I would be a hypocrite to say that these people are wrong for telling these Americans that they got to go. Okay, and if I was one of these Americans, if you had people who felt like this, in Mexico, okay, and they're basically threatening acts of violence. And again, in a country like Mexico, where law and order is, hey, is neither here nor there, right? Depending on where you at, right? I would seriously think
this is some mafioso scam type shit. Now, all those American businesses that got ransacked and shit was stolen, all that shit. Guess who they got to pay for protection now? Guess who they got to pay to make sure their stores don't get raided? And it ain't the government. It's the motherfucking cartel. This shit, the cartel let these people do that crazy ass shit because they know the gringos who want to stay in Mexico gonna pay them more. That's crazy.
Think about leaving, right? I would seriously think about moving on, right? Maybe going to another country, or something like that, or just coming back to America. So hey, it is what it is. I'm just wondering where these leftists. These leftists should be saying that no, this is racist, this is bigotry, borders don't exist, right? That the land is stolen, they can't tell people where they can and can't live. These undocumented citizens, right? Because that's what they call the illegals here in the United States of America, right? These undocumented citizens in Mexico City, they're just looking for a better life, a better quality of life. They just want more affordable housing. That's what they want. They contribute to the economy. They pay sales tax. They pay taxes. You can't kick these people out. They contribute. They're running away. You didn't hear America is now under the control of a fascist dictator, Donald Trump, right? He's Hitler. He's America's Hitler. They're escaping fascism, right? Where are all these people at? Where are all these people at? That's my question, right? This to me looks like racism, bigotry, xenophobia. But now I guess it's okay because they're probably talking about a lot of white folks, right? A lot of white people who have moved to Mexico. I guess it's okay to treat white people like that, right? When they're foreigners in somebody else's land, right? I guess that's okay. And in this situation in Mexico, a lot of these people are probably there legally, right? On, visas or whatever. Some of them are probably there illegally, but I'm just saying that in America, we can't tell illegals to go home, right? We can't do that, right? That's racism, hate, and bigotry. We can't tell them that they need to learn English, right? That they need to assimilate if they're going to be here, right? If you're going to stay in America, that you got to adapt to American culture. But again, in Mexico, totally fine, right? It's totally fine for them to tell Americans that if you don't assimilate, okay, if you don't learn Spanish, if you're going to drive up prices, if you're not going to contribute to anything, then you need to leave, right? Because you're gentrifying our city too much, okay? You're driving out the locals, okay? And that's why you got to go. It's not worth it. We don't want your money. Hey, I mean, I'm just saying the leftists should be speaking out against it. They should be saying that this is wrong. And furthermore, these protesters in Mexico City, they also should be protesting just as hard for their people to stay in Mexico, right? Not to come to the United States illegally, right? So again, if you're going to protest and tell the gringos to leave, then you also need to be protesting and telling your people to stay, because your people are fleeing your country. They're fleeing your country and they're coming to our country and they're causing some of the same problems that these people are complaining about. So just be consistent, right? If you're going to protest against the gringos in Mexico, fine, but also protest against your people leaving Mexico in the first place, right? Because if your people are just allowed to come into our country, unfettered, and you okay with that, then you can't complain about Americans coming into your country, right? Unfettered and staying and distorting the economy, right? You can't complain about that. So again, just show some consistency, right? Show some consistency. That's all I'm asking for.
I'm here because gentrification is just one more step towards colonization, dispossession, and the exploitation of our resources. Right now it's about the people, but it won't be long before they run out of oil, water, or lithium in other countries and come and take them from us.
Many Americans in Mexico are able to still receive high salaries in dollars from U.S. companies by working on laptops from their apartments.
The government is directing its public policies towards people with higher purchasing power, often illegally displacing local populations who have lived in these neighborhoods for 40, 50, and we have even documented cases of up to 60 years. In 5 years, rents have increased by 47%. This is violent for the local population. We are debating whether to pay for electricity, water, or food. Of course, we choose to eat.
Some activists blame Mexico's government for encouraging them. However, there's no simple fix. Imposing tougher visa restrictions on Americans could worsen relations with the U.S. Mexican citizens in the U.S. also send billions of dollars in remittances back to their families in Mexico. In a world where travel and communication are faster and easier than ever, these two nations are finding it harder to have neighborly relations. Wilson Dysart, Al Jazeera.
Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. The peasants are revolting. Yes, they certainly are revolting to look at. You know, somebody really ought to call Mayor Bass, let her know that Los Angeles is out of control these days. Oh, wait, but it's not Los Angeles, is it? Though you couldn't tell by looking. Seems like some of the locals down there in Tequilaville are taking exception to gentrification. But the gentrification, apparently in their eyes, doesn't come from the Blanco ruling class who actually run the place and are dominating them and slap them around like so many peasants. Instead, it's the gringos from up north that they're scared of and concerned about. Now, you know that mess had to come from their government, the same government that's actually been exploiting them and driving them out of their own country and telling them, you guys need to go anywhere other than here. They're not mad at their Blanco misleaders down there in Mexico. They're mad at the Blanco gringos in the United States. Go figure. Well, if this is their brilliant plan for how they're going to be stopping those gringos from coming in and buying up real estate, it's not a very smart plan. There's a number of Americans who go to Mexico for vacations, like Cancun, but there's also a lot of Americans who go for medical tourism. You had that case a few years back of those black tourists who went to northern Mexico to get some discount medications or whatever, and the cartels mistook them for Haitians. That's no joke, by the way. That's what happened. Apparently, they're down there beefing with the Haitians. They didn't know those people were actually foundational Black Americans. That caused an international stink, but the cartels had the shooters turn themselves in, which is more than what happens with practically every other murder down there. So I guess in this case, this is what counts for justice. The lesson that they should have taken away from all of this illegal immigration is that if their people had stayed in Mexico and built up their country, then they would be too expensive for Americans to come in and try to buy it up. You don't see the Japanese complaining about Americans and foreigners coming in, buying up the land, and the same thing goes for Canada. You want to know why? They built those places up. They're too expensive for that. A handful of gringos show up in these people's neighborhoods, and they're tearing up the whole city. Now, I wonder what would happen if millions of Americans came there every single year to stay. I wonder what their reaction to that would be. Not Americans coming to visit for a few days and then leave, but if millions of Americans were coming there every single year, and these Americans refused to learn the language. They demanded that English be spoken, that the government accommodate them, and that the culture needed to change for them. If Americans showed up and demanded that the 4th of July be celebrated and that they get government benefits and a ton of goodies and giveaways merely for being illegal aliens or just for being there, I wonder what their reaction would be to decades of that. But as I said before, don't kid yourself. This little display was set up by the Mexican government themselves. There's a number of American retirees who live in Mexico because it's less expensive and close to the U.S., and these kind of displays are meant to intimidate them. Now, because the gringo retirees down there are legally in the country and broke no laws, the Mexicans will have a hard time trying to find something to go after them about, especially because those people actually are putting something into the economy. They're not displacing workers there, and they're actually doing something other than taking from the economy. But then again, since when has law stopped the Mexican government from doing their dirt? It's not about prosperity for them. Of all of the groups from Europe who decided that they were going to do colonization, the Spanish by far were the most inept. Those guys never got their act together then or now. They couldn't run a colony any more than they could run their own country. And that same dysfunction also translated to the places that they colonized. A few folks from the U.S. are down there in Mexico buying some real estate. They came into the country legally. They're residing there legally, not committing any crimes. They're not bringing every one of their relatives and friends over to be sponsored to come in. And they're not lying and claiming that they're being persecuted in the U.S., though some of them might actually have a legitimate claim under the current regime. But you got a handful of what look to be paid vandals who are making sure to get in front of the cameras and cause a stink. That being the case, tourism is a crucial driver of Mexico's economy. I put economy in quotes. So if they're going to be running off all of the tourists or running off the people who come there from abroad, they're not going to have much left when it's all over. I guess they realize that all the little demonstrations in the United States, which by the way are also co-coordinated by the Mexican government, I guess they figured that those demonstrations didn't come to much. So now this is what's next. Threatening people from the United States if they decide to visit Mexico, even if only on vacation, never mind the fact that the people who live in Mexico don't want to live there. Speaking of vacations, the Orange Man has arranged for a number of illegals to get an all-expenses-paid trip to South Sudan. Because, hey, who doesn't want to visit a war zone for the summer? This was clearly a hand-picked group for the photo. You can tell because it's all multiracial. It looks like one of those United Colors of Bennington ads from the 90s. But this is something the Brits tried to do. They couldn't make it work because Rwanda didn't want to be the dumping ground for illegals from Britain, and the British simply didn't have the money for all of those flights to Africa that they were threatening to do. But Trump's going to give it a go, or at least he's going to have a photo op making people think that he did. This is obviously a high-profile intimidation tactic because even with all of ICE's raids for the cameras, they still haven't rounded up anywhere near the number of people that they would need to in order to make flights to Africa be feasible for the sake of repatriating or otherwise getting rid of massive numbers of people. Just keep in mind, the Orange Man has made certain exceptions to his policy, mostly for alleged farm workers. The problem with that is all of those farm workers came into the U.S. claiming asylum for persecution, and a lot of them, as soon as they get in, the first thing that they say is, now I want to bring over all of my folks from the home country. Trump would have to all but eliminate the asylum claim from being valid in the U.S., and he would have to eliminate all government programs for immigrants and yank federal funds from states to try to subsidize illegal aliens coming to the U.S. And of course, he would have to start prosecuting these unscrupulous landlords, these crooked businessmen, and these larcenous banks. That's something that he has yet to do. Because the landlords, the businessmen, and the banks, they should be considered no different than the illegal aliens themselves. They also need to be rounded up. The illegal aliens are coming to the U.S. because they know in advance that there's an entire infrastructure in place that will employ them, house them, and make it where they can send money back home, basically integrate them into the economy, which is what they came to the U.S. for. And there's a bunch of illegals who got green cards and immediately began sponsoring, quote unquote, their relatives and everyone else to bring them over too. I told you about that last week, but these corrupt businesses are the entities who are fueling the flood of illegal aliens. Unless they begin getting rounded up and thrown in jail too, then ultimately what Trump's doing is hoping to scare the illegals away. And that may work in the short term, but without punishing these criminal enterprises who are openly working to encourage them to come to the U.S. and making big money off of supporting them, then people will wait a little while, and before it's all over, the old life will return. But in the meanwhile, it would be interesting to see if Trump gets around to expanding his flights to Africa for illegal aliens. And you got all of these illegal alien activists and the tethers who are concerned about this, and they want for black folks to be scared. You guys ought to be concerned too, because today it's us, tomorrow it's going to be you. Never mind the fact that these very people who are claiming that, when they came to the U.S., they were the main ones attacking black people. They come from anti-black racist cultures, or in the case of many African and Caribbean enclaves, they come from cultures who, because of their jealousy of what we've accomplished, they come here and they want to try to find a way to look down on us because in their minds, they're like, well, we know you're looking down on us, so we got to look down on you. That's where that comes from. Jealousy, envy, just being off code as hell. But the people who are gnashing their teeth and who are now got their knees quaking because Trump has arranged for free flights for these illegal aliens to go to Africa, they might want to ask themselves, what was it that they were doing all of this time that made it where Black Americans have been saying, you know what, y'all got this. Everybody wants to try to guilt trip us into something, but nobody ever wants to look at their own behavior. What's happened is Donald Trump made it very clear that any of these people who thought to themselves that they were going to otherwise be shouting him down, that's not going to be allowed. And even some of their little political buddies, they're getting arrested as well. And now what these guys are doing is they're saying we're not really sure where to turn. That's deliberate. What Trump and Stephen Miller are doing is a basic part of war. They're demoralizing the enemy. There's no threat that there will ever be any retaliation from these people or even long-lasting hurt feelings for that matter because they know that they're in the wrong, and worse, they're utterly dependent on the U.S. economically. And of course, you got these people who come from Latin America who, as far as they're concerned, they identify as white on their driver's licenses and on their job applications and their school forms and census forms. And that being the case, whether they're prepared to admit it or not, they're still holding out a candle that they're going to be classified as white at some time in the future. For a lot of them, they just figured that if they live it long enough, apparently they're going to be able to manifest it. Well, the only manifest that they've got is a flight manifest to South Sudan. And that's the reason why we're seeing people nutting up left, right, and center. The Mexican government and their handful of hooligan crisis actors can be mad all they want, but the problem with a failed state is that they fail to make themselves capable of retaliating. And don't give me any crap about BRICS. With countries like Mexico, all they can do is be vassal states of stronger countries that are not failures, like China. That's how that one's going to shake out. You look at Mexico's history, and that's what they've always been, a tool of others. Even during both world wars, spoiler, Mexico was allied with America's enemies in both world wars. But then again, how much good did Mexico do for their Axis allies in either war? See, the problem for the people from Latin America is they thought that they were going to be building a road to the future, paving that road to the future over black people's dead bodies, is what they thought was going to happen. They were thinking to themselves that they were going to have it both ways, that they could go ahead and claim to be quote unquote people of color for the sake of taking advantage of what it is that black people have put in place. But by the same token, they also were going to be classifying themselves simultaneously as being white. And now some of them are starting to realize, however slowly, that that road that they thought that they were paving, well, the white supremacists have made up their minds that it's going to be a one-way street. Virtually all of the immigrants who came to the United States came as opportunists. But there are no bigger opportunists in world history than these white supremacists, and that's who these folks chose to handcuff themselves to. So they're just going to have to get used to taking the abuse. It's not like they can do much about it except for vent and rage in the streets. And these good white blancos up north, they're used to that. Just like their president making empty threats about mobilizing. Well, I guess we see what the mobilization is. A handful of hooligans in the streets. That's not going to change the calculus on anything. But if the Mexicans want to keep this up, go right ahead. They already have few people who want to go there, and they'll scare off what few folks might have been adventurous enough to come. And as for the idea that they're somehow going to be retaliating against the United States, that they're going to be driving out the gentrifiers, I consider the irony to be absolutely excruciating. Well, since there's probably going to be a lot more blancos coming down south and taking up more of the real estate, if the Mexicans want some pointers on what they should do, here's a suggestion. Learn to speak English. I recommend that they start by learning the phrase, no trespassing. Good day and be one.
Dr. Claude Anderson for years have been preaching the message of delineation. He has been warning about unchecked immigration. He warned about minority coalitions. And unfortunately, the people in his generation did not listen to him. He was like John the Baptist screaming from the wilderness about what was to come, and everyone just straight up ignored him. There was a while ago, he did an interview on the Rock Newman show when he was doing his show from Howard University. And I want to take some clips from that interview because thankfully, this generation in 2025 have started to listen to Dr. Claude Anderson. Let's go ahead and check this out.
Those people coming in from Jamaica or coming in from Africa, they have not been treated like black folk in this country. That's the first thing. And secondly, historically, they haven't had those historical experiences. They come in here voluntarily. When they come in here, they bring some cultural aspects from Africa. They can go back anytime they want. The people coming from Africa or coming from Jamaica didn't. They came here voluntarily. And the most important point on this is if you lump them with black folk, then you give the dominant white society a justification to say we don't owe black folk anything. Blackness is more than just color. It is their heritage. It's their history. It's their code of conduct. And more importantly, it is their badge of honor. And it's what it symbolizes the indebtedness that this country has to them. This country does not have any indebtedness to people coming from Africa. They don't have an indebtedness to people coming in from the Bahamas. If you lump black folk in there, you deprive black folk of the benefit, the debt that's owed. And when immigrants come in, watch the benefits they get. They go past black folk at 200 miles an hour. They do better right here in Chocolate City. Now they're underneath the immigrants. Immigrants, they come in the country, they get a point over black folk for being an immigrant. Blacks are the only non-immigrant. Two, all of them are classified as whites. The Arabs, Asian, Hispanic, they all been reclassified as whites. Even American Indians back in the 1890s became classified as whites. They get a point. That's the second point. They get over black folk in getting access to resources and benefits. The third thing they get the benefits of being put into a minority category. They're classified as minorities over black folk. Thirdly, they come in with a culture that they can establish a culture, that they can now build businesses and industries and relate back to their homeland. And lastly, what they can do, they also bring in a religious aspect and business opportunities for their people. Black folk get nothing. And they can come in and take and dominate black folk. Blacks to get out of affirmative action and go for reparations. I was getting ready. Then put your own self-interest first. And then what you do, then you say, I want to also rebuild my own communities. Go back and rebuild your own communities. Put your own businesses in there. A community is where you store your value, your culture, your history, your tax base, your jobs, and your employment opportunities. You store them in your own communities. That's why 98% of all these other groups, they have their own communities, spend their money with their own people. And you start practicing group economics and group politics. You pull out all the parties, build your own black independent parties. Move away from the Republican Party. Pull out the Democratic Party, because neither one of them have your interests at heart, and create your own parties, but don't run any candidates. So we will vote for any candidate in the National Black Independent Party who will promise the most and deliver resources to black folk to correct the structural inequity we're into.
Dr. Claude Anderson hit so many points, but the main point that he was hitting was delineation, and how he said that just lumping all of us together in one group as black would alleviate the folks from paying reparations. Think about it. Our reparations fight and reparations claim didn't get any headway until we delineated. Prior to that, when you say, just everybody's black, it don't matter what it is, we black, then we could not get any headway. So now that's why you're starting to see more studies of reparations being in the mainstream. Why? Because of delineation. And this is what Dr. Claude Anderson tried to tell everybody long time ago. This is what he tried to tell my parents, my grandparents. Hey, delineate. Hey, we need to work on FBAs and what we got going on, right? He warned supporting all this unchecked immigration into this country. And our civil rights leaders did support immigration. They was on this black and brown minority coalition. What did Jesse Jackson say? The Rainbow Push Coalition. That's what he was pushing. Jesse Jackson was very big at one point in time. The two people that was the most central figures in the 80s and 90s was Reverend Jesse Jackson and Minister Farrakhan. That was the main two. Of course, you had Khalid Muhammad, but he eventually passed away. But that was the main figures, Reverend Jackson and Minister Farrakhan. And Reverend Jackson is the one that pushed this minority coalition and all that. He was heavy on that. I remember that. That's how we got into all of that. Jesse Jackson is the reason why we started using the term African American. We was called black. We would say, hey, I'm black and I'm proud, say it loud and all of that. Then you go from I'm black and I'm proud to African American. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know where we from. You feel me? And when they use African American and moved away from black, that's when a lot of things just kind of went left. You understand what I'm saying? This country have always tried to see if they can lump us as a group of immigrants. And we're not immigrants, no way, shape, or form. But these minority coalitions, and we found out in the end that there was no coalition, number one. Number two, it was we were being used and abused in these so-called coalitions. These people come from their homelands with anti-black American sentiment. We found that out. And this is why today they're so shocked that while we just kind of like, yeah, y'all you do your thing over here, we're going to do ours, because we know how you feel about us in your homeland. We know what you've been told before you got here. You understand what I'm saying? Now, not only did Dr. Anderson say, hey, you got to delineate, but he also talked about how all these other groups are not only coming in to compete, but they're coming to take over. Let me tell you something.
when colonization was going on, and when these folks had colonized a country, one of the first things they did was bring their religion and their language and their values and their culture. They would take the indigenous language of that land and don't even allow people to be speaking it anymore. Now you have to learn English. You understand? Fast forward to 2025. You have sections in the United States of America, a country that's English speaking, saying that, oh, well, you got to know how to speak Spanish to get this job. And if you don't speak Spanish, you can't get it. In your country, not theirs, your country. There are people in areas in this country where you better know how to speak Spanish. So you're not, listen, if you have to speak Spanish, if you have to speak French, if you have to speak whatever language, if you have to speak that in your country, you've been taken over. Think about that. Right now in Mexico, they're protesting against Americans. And they're saying that, hey, you here, you need to be speaking Spanish. Because they mad that they have them speak more English. Now, I don't take an issue with that. Them saying they need to speak Spanish. But in this country, y'all bend and twist and all these other groups speaking their languages to them. Press 1 for English, 2 for Spanish. You go to their country, they're gonna say press 2 for English. The thing is, I want everybody to listen and think about this. You're being taken over. You got something in English and something in a different language. Why? Why do we got something in all these different languages for? Look, we live in the information age. Google Translate works very well. All kind of translated apps work very well. I'm just saying it works very, very well, right? The Trump administration, what it should do, since you got the House and Senate like literally on your side, you need to codify in law that English is the official language of the United States. Not executive order, but a codified law. And that at least on federal, everything federal and all federal documents, everything has to be in English. Well, can we get it translated to their language? They can get it translated online if they want to. But here, English. Because you're being invaded. That's the bottom line. Now, Dr. Anderson also mentioned that because these people come over, they hold their cultures intact, and they have no problem practicing group economics. But the main reason why FBAs have been having issues practicing group economics, because we haven't really been coming together until recently to delineation, because in order for you to really work with each other in group economics, you have to have a pride of your culture, a pride of your heritage. And when you have that, you feel it's a duty to work with your people. So with delineation, you're starting to see how more Black people now are coming together, how it's going to be much easier for us to unify with each other, work with each other, do business with each other. We're circling the wagons. Look what's happening with the Essence Fest right now. Essence literally been taken over by a different culture. Taken over because the owner is Liberian American, the CEO is Kenyan American. It's been taken over. And they brought their culture to Essence. And the magazine has never been right since, even though it was started in the 1970s by 4 FBA brothers. You understand? And FBA is now saying, nah, if you're not down with what we got going on, you may own something, but you're gonna tank it. Because we have, and I'm a firm believer of this, okay, they can own whatever they want to own. But the fact is, what the bad decision the dude made was not put an FBA woman or man in charge of Essence who is from our soil. That's the biggest issue. But see, if it wasn't delineation, we wouldn't have caught that. We wouldn't have caught all that, and we wouldn't have caught these foreign cultures that is foreign to us. That's no different if I go to Kenya, buy a magazine that's been like a staple in the Kenyan community, and then I buy it, and I bring an FBA sister to run that magazine, and then we start inputting our FBA culture into it and kind of mixing theirs. they would have a problem with that. Because they say, wait a minute, this magazine is Kenyan culture. This not no Black American culture. Nothing against y'all, but this is our culture you messing with. You understand? And I'm so glad FBAs are really drawing those lines in the sand, really drawing boundaries and letting people know it don't matter where you're from. You can be outside, you can be from the diaspora. The fact is, you're going to respect our culture. And if you're not, you will see an economic penalty. Whether it's from the folks or even someone in diaspora, you better have some respect. Dr. Anderson was warning us about, the situation with the Latinos. He warned about all this. He warned. And unfortunately, we have to pick up the pieces now and carry the ball. And that's okay. That's okay. Because I'm a firm believer of this. It's better to get it, better late than never. I believe in that. Some people say, oh, no, I don't believe in it. I do. I'd rather you get it late and then play catch up than you never get it. See, listen, we are in a good position right now. Listen, what we're doing right now with delineation is shocking to everybody. Dr. Anderson also said the Democrats won't do us right. The Republicans won't do us right. Now one of them will. We got to be independent. And that's things that we all are preaching now. None of us should be promoting no Democrat or Republican. None of us. Only thing we should be preaching is who going to give us our reparations in the form of cash payments? Who going to give us our anti-Black hate crime bill? That's the kind of things that we're talking about. Hey, the funds in the city, what's going to be appropriated to the Black community to build that up? Fighting gentrification in these cities, especially with these Black mayors like Chicago and many others. But you got gentrification going on. Or a city like Chicago, and you're bringing in all these migrants and papering them up. See, now we can focus on that. See, before we wouldn't have focused on all that. We'd have been quiet. We wouldn't have said anything. You wouldn't have people like Sister Jessica Jackson and Sister Danny C up there going in on them every day at the city council, because we'd have been on this minority coalition while we being destroyed. Because these other groups aren't coming in here to have a true coalition. They looking to get ahead. They look at us as a competing group. And Dr. Anderson said that many, many times. We on the right track. And I know Dr. Anderson, I know he sees this. I know he's happy that we on this track right now of delineation. And that's the only way we can get ahead. We are in the right place, and we didn't come out there talking about let's stand with all these other groups with ICE. No, because these other groups won't stand with us if it was the other way around. These other groups are saying, you're next. They're hoping. Listen, when they're saying you're next, it's not because Trump said it. It's not because ICE said it or Homeland Security said it. It's because that's what they're hoping. They're hoping FBAs are next. That's what their hope. Because it's happening to them. They hope it happens to us. That's why they kept saying you're next. And that's some low down crap. It really is. You wishing harm on FBAs because you knew you weren't in this country legally. Some of you been here 20, 30 years. And you've been through a lot of Democrat presidents who are very favorable to immigration. And you didn't take care of your business. I say this much. You should have really took care of your business when you had Biden and Kamala. That was the time to get your paperwork straight. Because he was very friendly with mass immigration. He's the king of mass immigration. See, you had, and y'all complain on Trump, but this is the issue. The pendulum was swung so far to the left. Mass illegal immigration, mass. So now the pendulum swings back to the right and say mass deportation. So y'all shocked, y'all seeing that, but you can't have mass illegal immigration and it don't swing to mass deportation. That's what happens when you operate in extremes. And people are so shocked. Well, people are shocked about all the people that was coming into this country. For all these freaking grown men who are criminals came into this country. You think people didn't want them out? And that's the Democrats' fault. Trump got elected because of Biden with all that mass illegal immigration. If he wouldn't have did that, Trump probably wouldn't have got elected. But it got that bad. Dropping these people off in city after city after city. And then when they come here, they demanding resources. They didn't work for it. They weren't bit by dogs and they didn't go through the Bloody Sunday on Selma. And they didn't go through any of that. But yet they can come plop themselves here, get resources, stay in free hotel rooms, then in New York, demand their cultural food. That was the funniest thing I ever heard in my life. You come to somebody else's country illegally, then you demand your cultural food. I'm like, and they was giving it to them. Then Eric Adams say, well, shoot, they still wasting the food. Let me go ahead and give them an EBT. And then when they gave me EBT, all the money they was getting, but yet black New Yorkers couldn't get that. And you wonder why FBAs are like, yeah, man, what ICE said. Yeah, they got a roll. That's why. Because they was taking our tax dollars. Oh, you FBAs, y'all MAGA and this and that and the third. No, but you know, a broken clock is right twice a day. And MAGA's right about deportation. MAGA's right about that. Whole lot of things they're not right about, but they're right about that. And they were putting these people in our neighborhoods. And they were taking jobs away from black people, even our black children. They got grown immigrants getting McDonald's jobs when these jobs used to be available for our teenage kids in the summer. Burger King, Wendy's. Our kids can't even get a McDonald's job no more because you got these grown immigrants working these jobs. Now, with Trump and mass deportation, now some of these jobs are starting to open back up. So that's why I tell our kids and I tell the men in the community, you see these ICE raids at these construction sites, you know where that's at? Hey, go over there and go get that job. Because that's a job. They can't say they ain't got no job openings, right? They need people. Go get them. I did a video on my other channels when we coming up. Well, a brother talked about that. How he said after ICE left, there's so many brothers he saw working. That's what I'm talking about. Dr. Anderson was right the whole time. None of them come over here to be a friend to us. They come to compete. And not only come to compete, they come to sabotage. Because they get on these jobs, they see brothers there, and they do everything they can to get you fired. To bring their people in. And people know they've done it. So no, we are on the right track delineating. And we got to look out for our people too. Just like they look out for theirs, we got to look out for ours. Delineation is the best thing we could have ever did for our community, for us to even have a chance in America. Because if Kamala would have won, man, we'd have been finished if she'd have won. Because she would have dumped another 20 million more on top of us. And she would have dumped another 20 million more, and nothing we could have done. She would have made us probably nationally, politically irrelevant by doing that. Because of Trump and what he's doing, now he disrupted that. So what Trump is doing in that area, that's actually helping the FBAs. I'm not saying his big, beautiful bill helps and all. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about on the immigration tip. That is a big help for FBA. Go get them jobs when they're available. Keep delineating, work with FBAs in business. Let's work with each other with school. You know, I get our kids and create schools for our children. Teach our kids our great FBA history. Because our kids need to know our history. We don't want them to know like, who is that? No, they need to know. Use whatever means you need to use to educate them. If you need AI to teach them, okay, AI or whatever you need to use to teach them, teach them. Because our kids need to know our history so they won't make a mistake of doing no minority coalition, right? Because we know minority coalition is dangerous to us and it's been so detrimental. Teach them not to let other groups play on their heartstrings, but teach them to say, show me the substance of what you did with us before. So our kids will make the same mistakes that the previous generations made. But, you know, to Dr. Anderson, you know, we definitely appreciate your message.
And I'm glad at least this generation caught it before it was too late. You know, I wish they would have listened to Dr. Anderson back when he said all this. We wouldn't be in this position. But hey, we got the ball now, so we're running with it.
Everything. I mean, we're talking 10. Good evening, fam. Welcome back to the show. It's your man, Tim Black. Man, I just saw something that made my blood boil. And if you're like me, it's going to make your blood boil too. It's a nearly 10-minute long, 9-minute and 53-second long video by CNN put out about a Cuban who came to America undocumented back in the 60s, who recently died after being held in detention for like a week. After he was released, he had a heart attack, and they covered this thing like this was everything. I mean, we're talking 10 minutes of wall-to-wall gaslighting about the conditions of this prison in Florida. Folks, they pulled out all the stops. 10 minutes. Now, look, of course, the death is a tragedy. It's not that his death is not it's not that the man's death is not a tragedy. It's that so are our deaths. Our deaths are tragedies too. Hit subscribe on this content right now so you don't miss another video from this show to you, because ain't nobody keeping it 100 the way I'm keeping it 100. And let's get into this segment.
As President Trump tours the new detainment center that he's calling Alligator Alcatraz, we're learning more about one migrant recently held at a nearby South Florida facility. This is 75-year-old Isidro Perez. He's pictured here with his family, the guy with the beard in the background. He's a Cuban immigrant who came to the United States nearly 6 decades ago, likely allowed entry under parole programs for Cubans fleeing Fidel Castro's communist regime. He came to the United States back when he was 16 years old, reportedly working as a mechanic and fisherman. But in June, Perez was arrested by ICE. When his family says that he was sitting at a community center, you can see him here in this photo provided by a family friend, the white beard, his hands behind his back. ICE says that he was charged with inadmissibility pursuant to the Immigration and Nationality Act. He was sent about an hour east of the facility where President Trump toured today to Chrome Detention Center, which in recent weeks has been in the spotlight for moments like this one. Around the time of Perez's arrest, local media captured this demonstration. It's a group of detainees at Chrome standing in what you can see as an SOS formation, essentially asking for help. According to a medical intake completed the day after Perez's arrest, he had been diagnosed with multiple health problems. His former partner, Maria Alanis, told the Miami Herald that the 75-year-old complained of severe overcrowding at Chrome and of there not being enough beds and him having to sleep on the floor. About 2 weeks after entering Chrome, Perez had to be taken to a local hospital where ICE says that he was admitted with unstable angina, cardiac issues that could lead to a heart attack. ICE says that he was discharged last Wednesday, but then the next day he reported chest pains and suffered a medical emergency. Rescue crews were able to revive him and then transfer him to a local hospital for treatment, but a short time later, he was pronounced dead. So why was this 75-year-old man found inadmissible into the United States after being here for almost 60 years? It may be because some 40 years ago in the early 1980s, Perez was convicted twice for possession of a controlled substance. Court records uncovered by the Miami Herald show that in one of those cases, he and another person were stopped on a boat and charged with possession and intent to distribute some 1,500 pounds of marijuana. At the same time, a judge sentenced him to 18 months in prison with 2 years probation. A family member told the Herald that The stint in prison actually gave Perez the opportunity to turn his life around, and he became an excellent person who helped his loved ones, especially the young ones, learn to swim and fish. In a letter notifying Congress that he'd passed, ICE says that, quote, it remains committed to ensuring that all those in its custody reside in safe, secure, and humane environments. Comprehensive medical care is provided from the moment that individuals arrive throughout the entirety of their stay. Here's the president's border czar, Tom Homan, at the White House when he was asked about Perez's case.
I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of that. I mean, people die in ICE custody. People die in county jails. People die in state prisons. I mean, if you look at, when I was ICE director and we drilled down that, the question should be how many lives does ICE save? Because when they go in detention, we find many with diseases and stuff that we deal with right away to prevent that. So I'm not aware of that specific case, but I'll say this. People can argue with me all they want, but the facts are the facts. I think that politicians in New Jersey found this out, that we have the highest detention standards in the industry.
The official cause of death for Isidro Perez is still being investigated. His family, though, has questions, including his stepdaughter, who told the Miami Herald, quote, I don't understand what's really going on. We're all human. Why are they picking up 75-year-old people?
The first thing I have to point out here is the length of the video, the framing of this entire segment. I cut it off because I didn't want to lose you as a viewer. But this video got over 375,000 views. Can you believe that? You got everything here. You got the granddaughter saying, what are they doing of detaining 75-year-old men? I'll have you know there are a lot of 75-year-old and older men in prison sitting right now who are American citizens. Happens all the time. That's the first thing. Number two, they use this footage of people spelling out SOS because they got to sleep on the floor and there's overcrowding and they're not getting medical attention the way they feel they should. Welcome to America. Third, they take this clip of Tom Homan saying, hey, people die in custody, making it seem like no one gives a damn, like this is a very bad reply about a person's death. It's particularly if you value that person's life, if you're a family member, a friend, or just a humanitarian. It made Homan sound horrible. But it's true. People do die in custody. We're going to cover that in this video. See, CNN is not just reporting this. They're framing this in a way to grab at your heartstrings in order to beat back the policies of deportation. It's so clear, it's so evident, even their coverage of this. When was the last time you seen a story on CNN about a Black American dying a week after leaving or a few days after leaving jail? You never seen it. It's not that it never happens. It's that it's not newsworthy. It won't rack up 375,000 views because it's pretty mundane, meaning this type of thing happens all the time. They're pushing a narrative that fits their agenda, and they're pushing our pain to the side. And that's why we got to call it out. First of all, America's prisons have problems, Johnson. Mass incarceration. We got 20% of the world's prison population, despite having only 5% of the global population. The U.S. houses more than 20% of the world's prison population since 1970, and incarceration population has increased by 500%. Since we started voting Democrat, 90 to 95%, the prison population increased 500%. And who do you think it increased most with? We'll get to that. All right, so we got the global comparison, we got the growth rate. The current total is 2 million people incarcerated. Approximately 2 million Americans are currently in prisons and jails. Then we got the annual costs. $182 billion total system costs, including policing, courts, and family costs. Taxpayer burden continues to grow. Violence crisis. Male inmates 25% of male inmates are assaulted. That's 1 out of 4 prisoners report physical assault during their sentence. I don't think people truly realize how bad our prisons are. We have healthcare problems, healthcare failures. 19% never see a doctor. This man did see doctors. Nearly 1 in 5 prisoners never see a healthcare provider while they're incarcerated. I'm just trying to make people understand that what happened with this man and what he faced is typical, for prison inmates across the country. I don't think what happened with him is much different than what happens in general. Now let's talk about the racial disparities, because I think this is important to my audience. Black boys, 1 in 3 will be incarcerated in their lifetime. 1 in 6 Latinos will be incarcerated in their lifetime. So it already shows we're 2 times more likely to be incarcerated than Latinos. And if we compare white kids, 1 in 17, 20 times more likely for black citizens to get life without parole for nonviolent crimes. 20 times. Then we got the mental health problems, right? We got 43% have mental health disorders, yet only 6% receive professional help at any given time. Recidivism, 68% are rearrested in 3 years. Our system fails at rehabilitation. 83% arrested within 9 years. Technical violations, 128,000. 9 criminal violations. People in prison for probation, parole violations, not new crimes. And chronic conditions. They need ongoing care. Most prisons have chronic health conditions requiring continuous treatment. Tom Holman, the border czar guy, he said, hey man, we do a better job than our local prisons. Now I need to fact check that to make sure it's true, but I guess it makes sense. They have less people in those detention centers than the general, regular penitentiary might have, right? Newer facilities. We know that they're definitely more under the microscope than other facilities. I don't know where people have been, but this has been going on for quite some time. I know people that work with the prison systems. They talk about it. It's not a hidden information. And what the Democrats are doing, and it ticks me off, is they're looking at it now and they're only reporting on it because it's a benefit to them to report on this immigration issue and tie it to Trump and blame Trump for the death of this man, for instance. But all across this country, there are citizens that are dying in prisons. Let's talk about what they're not talking about. They're not talking about the numbers of black men and black women who, after release from prison, die from heart attacks. We know heart disease is the #1 killer for black Americans. You don't think they couldn't find stories of black Americans after being released from prison who have heart attacks? I'm just asking. Of course they could. But they wouldn't want to go do something like that. No one's going to watch that video. They're not going to get nearly 400,000 views on a video about black people having heart attacks. You think Chrome's bad? Try Rikers, Cook County, or any other state pen. I'll show you bad. I'll show you overcrowded. We got black Americans packed into these facilities like sardines, dying from neglect, dying from violence in the prison. They don't even make it to the hospital. These institutions, they break your body and your spirit. Y'all, where's the CNN special on that? Where's a 10-minute deep dive into our stories? We are not the flavor of the year, month, day, moment. We're talking Black Americans, 13% of the population, and we're 40% of the prison population. And they couldn't find a story. They couldn't find our story. Do you think they didn't find our story because it doesn't exist, or that they didn't even bother to look? I think we both agree they did not bother to look. Now, I know my audience. You are fed up with the Democratic Party. You're tired of their theatrics, the show, the performance. You may or may not have voted for Trump, but there are certain policies that Trump has implemented that you favor, such as deportation. In fact, I got a feeling you're sitting here right now nodding your head. Nod your head, hit the like button. Nod your head, hit subscribe. Listen, you see how media picks and chooses stories in order to build a narrative, in order to discredit those policies. But where's the tribute to our brothers and sisters who are going through the same issues that they are reporting regarding immigrants or undocumented immigrants? That's all I'm asking. Equal treatment. They're complaining about these people not being treated equally, only for them to focus on them and unfairly or unequally focus on their issues. Make that make sense. You complain about inequality, yet you're instituting or you're performing inequality and favoritism in your own coverage of these groups. Under Trump, and only under Trump, does every incident or issue with ICE make the news. It make you think there's no ICE unless Trump's in office. But there was ICE the whole time. There was ICE under Biden and ICE under Obama. But no one covered it. CNN did not cover it to this extent under the Democratic presidents. You support deportation because you support fairness and accountability, not because you support heartlessness. There is a difference. Am I right? We are just tired of being overlooked and having the books cooked.
The issue of immigration. How is President Trump seen as doing on that?
Yeah, you know, if we just take a look at the baseline numbers here, this is Trump's net approval rating on immigration. It's gone up like a rocket. Compare now versus 8 years ago during Trump's first term. Look at this. In his first term, Trump was way underwater at minus 21 points. But look at this. He's up over 20 points. Now in the aggregate, he is in positive territory at plus 1 point on his net approval rating. Some other polls even have it a little bit higher than that. There is no issue on which Trump is doing so much better than he was in his first term, more than the issue of immigration. No wonder the Times has written up the way that he is. Trump is begging for a fight on this because he knows what he's doing so far is working with the American electorate.
But all across this country, there are citizens that are dying in prisons. U.S. citizens that are not migrants, that are not undocumented. And it doesn't make the light of day because they don't really care about inmates. They don't care about people dying in prisons. If that's the case, they could do documentary series, updates, follow this closer. They don't. The only reason why the Democratic Party is talking about it is because they want to hurt Trump. If not, then this will be a regular recurring situation because believe it, our prisons, they are so dangerous that they deserve their own focus. That's if they actually cared, and they do not. So that's why I've been so ticked off when I see these Congress people, these Democratic Congress people, going to detention centers. They drive by 3 facilities on their way to an immigration detention center. Don't stop at the centers where U.S. citizens are being held to see what kind of conditions they're in, to see what's going on there. No, that's not important because they're only doing this for political grandstanding. They're doing it because this is how you make a name for yourself. They're doing it because this helps the Democratic Party. And that's another one of the reasons why I say screw them. That's why I say we need to get away from the Democratic Party, because too many of us buy into this nonsense. I'm not saying the Republicans are great when it comes to prisons, but at least they're not cherry picking. You know what they don't do? They don't go and start caring whether it's a migrant. They don't care at all. That's my interpretation of it. So you want the person that's virtue signaling, pulling at your heartstrings, trying to make a political point, pretending to care, or you want to just be like, oh, these people don't care. We need to fight against them to make them care. Or you want the people that pretend to care when they don't. I don't like deception. I don't like phonies. I don't like all this noise about a problem they know has been going on. Fix the problem. Not just try to fight Trump. Orange man bad does not help anybody. Perfect. You made it to the end of the video. I appreciate you. Now, Google thinks this next video is going to be perfect.
So instead of you having to purchase gasoline, you would get plastiline. There is a young gentleman in Georgia who is an inventor, and he's been working on this, changing plastic into fuel. In other words, he calls it plastiline. So instead of you having to purchase gasoline, you would get plastiline. And he's been working on this for quite a bit. He got a lot of attention last year. And now this young man is under attack. Somebody is watching him, according to him, that people are watching him. I kid you not. And so I think that capitalism, I think that big business would have a big problem with what he is doing, because that would mean a different story here for oil and gas and all of this stuff. But check it out. I want him to show you what he was doing, and then we'll get into the warning that he gave everybody recently.
So I have 3 days to make 5 gallons of my plastiline, gasoline alternative made from plastic waste. Why? Well, because I have a very exciting collaboration coming. We're going to run a beautiful vintage car off of this fuel. There's a lot of work to do. Let's get started. Wait. Much better. Much safer. Let's make this fuel, baby, from plastic waste.
I'll just mute it here for a second while I talk over it. I wanted you to see how he's doing this. I found this so interesting. Pretty cool, huh? And how many people knew this? How many of you knew that you can make fuel from plastic? Oh, Peter knows. Peter said, I subscribe to this guy. Okay, so he knows them. All right, let me turn the volume back up. Pretty cool, huh? And then we'll just fast forward just a little bit here so you can see the liquid process. This is the part I thought this was really cool. There's the fuel, guys. All right. So you guys can see the gist of it there. And I just found out about this guy about a couple of days ago. I didn't know about him, but I found out about him because he made the video that alarmed people where he said they're watching him, they're following him. And so we'll get to that as well. But I just thought this was so cool. And for the science, for those of us that like to geek out with science, this is like phenomenal, right? So
from plastic waste.
Okay, and we got to pause it there because of the music. Now, I wanted you to see it actually run in a car because I think that is important. So here is that demonstration. He tried this in Chicago. Check this out.
All right. Good. Let's crank it up.
Let's get up out of the way.
All right. He calls it plastic. All right, let's make our way to the front, everybody. Back how we were. Oh, yeah, watch out for that.
You want to donate? There's GoFundMe.
All right, I'll let you know. All right, everybody, make our way back to the front. All right. Everybody make it to the front. Make it to the front. Everybody that's filming.
Hey, this is a live stream. He ran the diesel truck until it ran out of fuel.
And this is a reminder to everybody here, everybody watching. If you want to support my mission to take sunlight and turn sunlight into fuel made from plastic waste, you can go to my GoFundMe here. We're looking to raise $16,000 to get all the solar equipment I need. Huge thank you to Dan. He's a solar engineer that's donating 15 solar panels right here in Chicago to the cause. Huge thank you to Damien. He helped connect me with everybody out here, help me give me a place to stay. Huge thank you to Tony for the truck, Ulysses for his truck. Huge thank you to Shannon for the space, and huge thank you to all of you and all Chicago and Illinois for making it out today. Everybody give yourself. Yes, sir. All right, is everybody ready?
Yeah.
And look, I gotta ask. Do you guys think it's gonna run?
Yeah.
All right. Yes, sir. All right, Tony, hit it.
Yeah. Give it a minute. It's going. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a demonstration of that, right? A demonstration of diesel from recycled plastic powering a vehicle. And imagine if this really took off, right? We got to drop the beat for this, guys. Just imagine if you had this and you didn't have to rely on regular gas. We got to drop the beat before the holiday weekend. Dance with me. Dance with me. Drop the beat in the street. Woo! this. I love it. I love seeing young people do such great things. I really do. And now I say that because that young man who's been working on this obviously for quite some time apparently is being followed. And we want to go ahead and get to that part here. But many of you were asking about the plastic to gas process here. He explained part of it in this interview. Check this out.
Crude oil. Going back to the energy thing, energy can't be destroyed nor created. So I'm like, well, that's untapped potential energy right there.
And think about how much waste.
Go back, sorry.
So this technology has been around for a while. The technology of turning like organic matter into fuel, been around. It came down to, I saw an article in 2020 talking about 3.4 billion masks in the ocean. I mean, those masks, most of them made of plastic, and it just had me thinking like, that's wild. That much plastic already, the message just started being used. Right. 3.4 billion in the coral reefs.
COVID and all of that.
They found them in like the Mariana Trench and stuff, so deep, and it's like clearly there's an issue. There's no value to plastic. Right. Once it's done being used, we don't care. We want to get rid of it. Right. But I knew plastic is made of petroleum, crude oil. Going back to the energy thing, energy can't be destroyed nor created. So I'm like, well, that's untapped potential energy right there.
There you go. That's the answer. Plastic, petroleum. Again, energy can't be, created nor destroyed. Now, he sent out this message. Again, his name is Julian Brown. Listen to what he's saying now. And this was recent. Typical African shared this. African-American man Julian Brown, who made his own fuel station from plastic waste since he was 17 years old, raises awareness that he's being targeted. So guys, listen up.
I know that I'm not going to live long. And that's why I put every day, every hour, every minute into building, into growing. Why am I out here working on this plastic in the fuel reactor I've been working on for 5 years? Since I was 17. Why am I out here in 100-degree weather? Why am I out here despite being falsely accused and reported to the EPA and the IRS? Why am I out here despite weird black helicopters that turn off their radar transponder circling me 6 times at night? Why am I out here?
Everybody hear that part? So he's been reported to the EPA, and there's a black helicopter that's circling around. You see, the billionaire class, they don't want something like this to happen. You know why? And remember, I told you guys this before, that I really do believe that if medicine really wanted to have a cure for cancer, they would have it. I told you this, right? Right. Because like I said before, I just don't believe that all these years they've been doing all this research and they're like, no, we don't have no cure. But other countries have implemented other means to take care of that. So think about that for a second. We're talking about an industry that makes a lot of freaking money. We're talking about oil. We're talking about the gas. Like, that's an industry that makes a lot of money. Big part of the reason why the U.S. wants to have an Israel in the Middle East, as Biden put it, is to protect those types of resources, right? The oil. There's a lot of oil that's around Iran, right? This is why they say, oh, Iran's our enemy. Right? Because they want that oil. You're talking about a complete game changer in the world, not just in the United States. If this became like huge and everyone's like, oh, well, we could just take plastic, recycle plastic and use that for fuel, what does that do to the oil industry? That means some of these big oil kings might lose some of their money, and they don't like that. And you guys know that there are some people right here in the United States that made a lot of money off of oil and still make a lot of money off of oil. They don't want to lose that at all. So they look at someone like Julian and they say, hold up, now you might be messing with our money. And this is why I always say, if you follow the money, you'll see where the problem is really coming from. The billionaire class is a problem. So this is one thing I agree with Zoran on when he said billionaires got to go. They do got to go. You become a billionaire by exploiting other people. Now you got this gentleman out here working his ass off to try to do something useful with plastic. and use it to create fuel to power people's cars. Do you realize what a game changer this could be in the world? But the big oil kings don't like that. And I think that's why he's now being watched. And I think we know where those helicopters probably came from.
Why am I out here despite weird black helicopters that turn off their radar transponder circling me 6 times at night? Why am I out here sleeping in my van, crazy humidity, mosquitoes, gnats flying in, and yet I still do it? Why am I out here despite having to drive 4 hours every time I want to work on this machine? Because when I was doing it in my parents' backyard, I blew myself up and I had to go to the hospital for 2nd-degree burn surgery. I do this because this is my mission that I've assigned myself to. I do this because I do not fear death. I do not fear suffering or uncomfortability. You know what I fear? I fear allowing an idea of something that may not even exist or happen, have enough control over your entire life to where you're not even really living your life.
You guys, he knows. Dwayne says he is not simply being watched, he's being targeted. Guys, he knows that by him doing this, this could cause him his life, like cost his life. And he's letting everybody know he doesn't fear it. He doesn't fear like death at all, because he knows that people they're targeting him. I would say the same thing if somebody, if a scientist and a doctor all of a sudden one day said, hey, I got the cure for cancer. I think they'd come after them too, because like I said before, as long as there is illness, there is treatment, and there's a lot of money to be made off of treatment instead of having an actual cure that would get rid of this illness. Always goes back to the money.
That's the only thing I fear. And thus, I am completely set on what I want to do here, and nothing will steer my course but myself. And I am not a quitter. And now that I've set my mind on this, because I wish to liberate humanity, I wish to liberate humanity from this cycle in which we're bound by waste, in this cycle in which we're bound by division, in this cycle in which we're bound by not knowing ourselves. I wish to free us all from all of this. And now that I'm set on that mission, I'm not giving up. And so it will happen, no matter what. Because you know what? To me, when I'm building something, I expect it to be hard. I expect it to be uncomfortable. I expect it to be difficult. You know why? Because that's the whole point. You have to suffer to grow. You have to feel uncomfortable to attribute value to what you do. So you may see this and you see a piece of metal with certain pieces of metal welded onto it, but I see it for what it really is. I see it because when I see this, I can go back in time to not just putting it together, but the motivation as to why I put it together, the hope, the purpose, the passion, all right here embodied. My soul is within this, just as yours is within anything you do and put your mind to as well. So if you wonder why I'm out here and why I'm not going to do anything else but continue to stay on this mission until I see it through, until I say it's complete, that is why. Because it doesn't matter what anything externally is. There is no threat. There is no uncomfortability. There is no amount of suffering that will steer me from what I wish to do, because that is the life I wish to live. It's inevitable.
I will put the link in the chat. I know some of you were asking for the link to this, so I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat for that video. Again, his name is Julian, and we gotta cover these stories. Julian Brown. Let me go ahead and share it here. I hope that works out okay. There we go. There's the link there. I hope you guys can access it. Okay. One thing about this show, I try my best to cover some things that I know are not going to be covered elsewhere. And this is one of those stories, because I think that, oftentimes we talk about the problem, but we don't get to the solution. What he's doing could be a possible solution, could rid us of these oil spills, oil crisis, et cetera, just dealing with oil in general. And I think that when we talk about challenging power, what he is doing is actually challenging power. He's providing an alternative, and the billionaire class don't like that. And so you see the difference between what he's doing and the politicians who perform for you. So this is an example. That's a different way of challenging power. And notice he don't answer to nobody. He not working for nobody under this is all him. And they don't like that. So I put that link there. Please make sure you share that with people, and we'll clip the stories for the stream, and you'll have this over the weekend that you can share the video clip with people as well. Again, his name is Julian Brown, and he is being targeted.
Buckle up, everyone, because the US dollar may be headed towards something we haven't seen in our entire lifetimes, a collapse in global confidence. And no, this isn't fear-mongering. This is about real-world warning signs that are flashing red from Washington to Beijing to Johannesburg right now. I spoke to Congressman Ron Paul for like 30 minutes the other day, and he said something that really stayed with me. He said, Clayton, I don't know how else to say this so that people will pay attention, but the US dollar is heading for collapse. He said, if you want to get an idea of what this is going to look like, look at Zimbabwe's currency.
You know, that's the way it works in places like Zimbabwe and Venezuela. You know, it finally hits, and then there's runaway inflation. There's a collision, and then they have to do a new currency.
Yeah, he warned, by the way, all of us about the 2008 collapse, and no one listened to him. Few people did, but mostly no one. Cable news kind of like laughed at him. Then most Americans lost everything. And while most Americans are asleep at the wheel right now, the rest of the world is actively preparing for life after the dollar. So let's break it all down with all of the latest numbers, all of the data that Congressman Ron Paul and Thomas Massie are currently watching. So let's start with the basics. The United States is now sitting at over $34 trillion in debt with no end in sight. That's more than the entire GDP of the United States, and growing by the second, by the way. And even worse, the interest alone on that debt could hit $1.6 trillion per year by the end of the decade. That means just keeping the lights on in Washington, D.C. could cost more than the entire U.S. military budget. And if foreign nations stop buying our debt, game over, which, as we'll see, is already happening. Now, if you couple that with the Fed's whiplash monetary policy, inflation hit a 40-year high in 2022, forcing the Federal Reserve into its most aggressive rate hikes in modern history. And the result? A short-term sugar high for the dollar's value, followed by multiple bank failures and then instability right here at home. And pain for countries that were relying on the US dollar debt abroad, like Japan. Even central banks around the world are reading the writing on the wall. They're dumping US dollars, US treasuries, and they're buying gold. More than 1,000 tons of it a year every year since 2022. That's not a hedge. That's a plan B. But the economy story is just one side of the coin. The real threat to the dollar is political dysfunction in Washington. Remember the debt ceiling crisis late last year? The one where we came within days of a default. Once again, it wasn't the first time, and it certainly won't be the last time. It was so bad that even Fitch Ratings downgraded the United States credit rating, saying the quiet part out loud that the U.S. is no longer seen as a fiscally responsible government. That should terrify every American who holds dollars in your savings account or pays taxes or relies on retirement savings. You know, you're planning your retirement hoping that it's going to be there. And when our institutions lose global credibility, so does our currency. And now this is where things get really dangerous, the rise of the BRICS nations. Now, we've been using the dollar as a weapon, freezing foreign reserves, cutting countries off from the SWIFT banking system, threatening sanctions with the push of a button. And while that may feel like strength in the short term, it's actually backfiring in a big way, a huge way. I mean, just look at what happened after the United States and Europe froze $300 billion of Russia's central bank reserves. The rest of the world, especially the so-called global south, took notice. And if it can happen to Russia, it can happen to anyone, right? And the Biden administration set up a plan to basically funnel that stolen $300 billion and give it to Ukraine, the most corrupt government in Europe. Who would want to be part of that? Russia's saying, you're going to take my money and give it to Ukraine? Really? That's why the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are now taking serious steps to de-dollarize their economies. They're not just talking about it, they're doing it. China and Russia, 90% of their trade is now in yuan or rubles. India is buying oil from the UAE and Russia in rupees, not US dollars. Brazil struck a deal with China to trade in local currencies, bypassing the dollar completely. Even Saudi Arabia. This was a bombshell last year, late last year. The heart of the petrodollar system, Saudi Arabia, now openly accepting other currencies for oil. That's huge. But because once energy starts being traded outside the dollar system, the demand for the dollar drops like a rock. I mean, it was called the petrodollar for a reason. But it's not just about trade. It's about building a parallel financial system. BRICS nations are rolling out their own versions of SWIFT. Russia has SPFS. China has CIPS. And they're even discussing a unified digital payment platform, a kind of BRICS bridge, if you will, that would completely bypass U.S. control. No more SWIFT. No more U.S. dollar. There's even talk of a new reserve currency backed by a basket of BRICS currencies and commodities, possibly gold. Now, while that's still in the early stages, the groundwork is being laid, and it's being laid quickly. It stalled out late last year. China hit a bit of a snag, but word among the banking elites is that it's back on. And we have that big BRICS summit coming up in Brazil.
The 17th BRICS summit is set to get underway in Brazil this week, bringing together leaders from some of the world's most influential emerging economies.
And let's not forget about the BRICS New Development Bank, headquartered in Shanghai. It's now lending in local currencies, not US dollars. That's a direct challenge to the World Bank, to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which is basically like one big cartel anyway. They've historically enforced dollar dominance. Oh, they'll make you pay. Like, hey, Ukraine, you want to borrow a lot of money from us? The IMF will gladly give you a loan, which you'll be indebted for the next 70 years. It is. It's like, it's like the mafia. So BRICS policymakers have long voiced concerns that the dollar-centric system imposes unfair costs on emerging economies. One issue is the spillover from the U.S. monetary policy. When the Federal Reserve hikes rates or the dollar gets a little stronger, it can actually cause capital flight and currency depreciation in emerging markets, forcing them to hike rates in turn to try to slow their growth. The South African central bank governor warned in 2023 that this dynamic could leave developing countries permanently more prone to instability. Another issue is that key commodities like oils, metals, foods are mostly priced in dollars. So when the dollar rises, those imports become costlier in local currency. That means much higher inflation in import-dependent countries. BRICS economies like Brazil, India, South Africa import large amounts of dollar-priced oil, making them very vulnerable. And additionally, many emerging nations have significant external debt in dollars. In 2022, about half of India's and China's external debt was dollar denominated. So that means a stronger dollar raises the real burden of that debt. And BRICS leaders are on the record saying that dollar dominance is an inherent defect of the global financial system. It's defective. It's all they've known, though, for so many years, the bullies of the West. So if you're thinking, well, none of those currencies are strong enough to replace the dollar, you're absolutely right for now. But this isn't just about one currency replacing the dollar overnight. It's about the US dollar on its own collapsing. So you might be watching this saying, yeah, BRICS, they're not there yet. Yeah, maybe. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't need any help from BRICS. What we're doing to the US dollar is collapsing it all by ourselves. So screw Russia. BRICS is rising. Yes, they are. The dollar is declining. Yes, it is. But really, the collapse is all by ourselves right now. It's all about a slow, steady erosion, 1,000 paper cuts that weaken the dollar's grip on global finance. The biggest paper cut of all, as Ron Paul told me, is made by our own hand, printing money, borrowing more money to pay the interest on the massive debt that we already have.
If you print a lot of money, the value of the dollar goes down. So that's what it's being done mostly for the government to maintain it. So the dollar is still there, but the dollar, we're in a process of liquidating it. So in real terms, the dollar is worth less.
We don't need to thank China or Russia for that. We have ourselves to thank for this mess. So what does all of this mean for you and me? Well, if the dollar continues to lose its status as the world's reserve currency, here we go. The US will have a much harder time borrowing any kind of money. Inflation will skyrocket, especially for imported goods. Your savings and investments priced in dollars, like if you got US dollars in your bank account, it could lose purchasing power fast. I mean, that's why I'm always pushing you guys to invest in gold and silver. I mean, you guys do whatever you want, but I've been warning about this for a long time. I mean, the warning signs are here. The question is whether our leaders are paying attention. Because let's be clear, de-dollarization isn't a future risk anymore. It's happening right now. So that's the news update part of today's video. Now,
BRICS bloc issued a joint statement where a range of critical points were made on global affairs. The joint declaration underscores the fact that the global south is very much aligned, despite what Western propaganda media tries to tell us, on some of the key issues and developments in international relations. The joint declaration, which I'm about to walk you through in this video, proves it. Of course, nations disagree and they don't have to align on every single policy decision. They face their own challenges, but the fact that they do see eye to eye on some of the most pivotal moments, some of the most critical issues, that to me is very telling. That speaks volumes.
Multipolarity is not a choice, but an objective reality. It's coming to replace the old neoliberal model, which is outdated, which was based on neocolonial practices.
So in this video, I will walk you through the key takeaways from the BRICS declaration. First, the BRICS nations underscore their full support for a Palestinian state on 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as capital, and the BRICS bloc called all parties for an unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. BRICS expresses their deep concern over ongoing Israeli attacks on Gaza and the blockade of humanitarian aid. The bloc calls for full adherence to international law and an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces, and release of hostages, as well as unhindered aid delivery. It reaffirms support for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees and the Palestinian right to self-determination, stressing the need to unify Gaza and the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority. Forced displacement is firmly rejected by the BRICS bloc. So BRICS backs a two-state solution, in other words, based on 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as Palestine's capital, and it urges the international community to support Palestinian statehood and reconstruction efforts. Now, when was the last time that we heard anyone here in the United States or the West more broadly call for adherence to international law when it comes to Israel's actions in the Middle East and more specifically in Gaza? All right, let's move on. BRICS also condemns U.S. protectionism, or tariffs in other words, and joined U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran. More specifically, talking about tariffs, BRICS opposes the rising trade restrictive and unilateral measures such as tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and protectionism disguised as environmental policy, which threaten global trade, supply chains, and economic stability. The bloc reaffirms reaffirmed its commitment to a fair, rules-based multilateral trading system centered on the WTO with special provisions for developing countries. It calls for urgent reform of the World Trade Organization, including the restoration of its dispute settlement system, which we know doesn't really work very well. BRICS also condemns unilateral coercive measures and economic sanctions not authorized by the UN Security Council, citing their harmful impacts on human rights, on development, and global equity, and calls for their immediate elimination. The third key takeaway is the demand for Israel to withdraw from occupied Syrian territory. BRICS supports Syria's sovereignty and a UN-led inclusive political process under Resolution 2254. It condemned all violence, terrorist acts by ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and the presence of foreign fighters. The bloc welcomed the lifting of unilateral sanctions to aid Syria's recovery, and it strongly urged Israel to end its occupation of Syrian territory in line with international law. Now, when it comes to Syria, there's a lot going on, and I'm not going to get into the specifics, but I will say that al-Sharaa, who is the present leader of Syria, is a former ISIS and al-Qaeda leader with a $10 million bounty, previously groomed by Western powers. So during the summit in Brazil, the BRICS bloc also condemned ISIS, al-Qaeda, and Salafi terror attacks in Syria. And I think that goes a long way because the BRICS bloc acknowledges the role of foreign nations and foreign actors in Syria's tragic fate. Now, what's really interesting is that the bloc condemned Ukraine's attacks on civilian trains in Kursk, in Voronezh, and in Bryansk regions in May and in June of this year. Lastly, the BRICS bloc formally welcomed Indonesia as a new BRICS member. Southeast Asia, as you may know, has become an important development trajectory for the Global South. BRICS recognizes Belarus, Bolivia, Kazakhstan, Cuba, Nigeria, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Uganda, and Uzbekistan as BRICS partner countries. This marks a significant expansion of the bloc's global engagement and strengthening its partnership across multiple regions. Now, very briefly, I want to emphasize the importance of Southeast Asia for the bloc's future. The 2025 BRICS Summit in Rio marks a pivotal moment for the Global South, particularly for Southeast Asia, as the bloc expands and evolves into a credible platform for strategic and economic cooperation. With countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam engaging as members or partners, the region sees BRICS as a way to ensure long-term stability and sovereignty. The new development bank and the contingent reserve agreement, which I discussed in great detail in a previous video, offer practical alternatives to Western-led financial institutions, appealing to nations who see diversification rather than alignment with any one power as their main goal at the moment. BRICS also provides a degree of geopolitical flexibility amid rising US-China tensions. Of course, challenges do remain, and that could be related to China's role within the bloc, which is seen as a threat by the United States. Of course, there is that unresolved South China Sea disputes and risks to ASEAN unity. Malaysia, as ASEAN chair, is already balancing this complex terrain, even as the United States threatens tariffs under renewed Trump-era policies. So while full ASEAN membership in BRICS is unlikely at this point in time, individual nations are quite clearly and steadily increasing engagement with the BRICS alliance, not as a rejection of the West, by the way, but as a strategic hedge. Ultimately, Southeast Asia's involvement signals a broader shift. The Global South is stepping forward, asserting agency in global affairs and using BRICS not to choose sides, but to expand choices and to reclaim sovereignty in an increasingly polarized and fragmented world. Now, show your support. It goes a long way. Subscribe, like, and share. Support my work on Substack and Patreon. You will see more content on those platforms. I would love to see all
So this is very hilarious. It seems that countries around the world are not dancing to the tune of Trump and friends. Let's remember the big promise, the infamous 90 deals in 90 days. Now, Lutnick basically promised that to the entire world, and everyone with half a brain cell knew that it would never ever come to fruition. And now we have Scott Bessent freaking out. We don't even have 5 trade deals, and the Treasury Secretary is now scrambling to explain the situation.
Again, he didn't promise this, and when we send out the 100 letters to these countries, that will set their tariff rate. So we're going to have 100 done in the next few days. And
but that's not a deal, that's a threat.
No, that's the level. That's the deal. If you want to trade with the United States, this is.
But that's not a negotiation, that's just
many of these countries. Many of these countries never even contacted us. So that's the thing about being the deficit country, Dana.
Now, did you hear that? Many of the countries didn't even contact Bessent, and silence sends a very powerful message here. They simply don't care anymore. Now, some countries like Vietnam, who are heavily dependent on the US market, they definitely have to negotiate. Nothing wrong with that. But the global economy simply has had enough. So now Bessent wants to send 100 letters and is trying to rebrand ultimatums as trade deals. And at this point, it's hilarious and sad at the same time. Now, the ultimatum is actually quite brutal. Some countries could be facing tariff rates as high as 50%, and over 50 countries could be on the hit list. But if history is any guide, it just won't work. Sanctions, embargoes never end well in the history books. Now, the US might be the world's biggest economy, but it's still one economy when you compare it to the rest of the world. And looking at US imports, we can see how the big boys trading with the US are still subjected to high tariffs, especially Canada and, of course, China, almost 40% of total US imports. Even Japan, Vietnam, and Korea, they all have tariff rates of 20% or higher. Now, this is a really crazy gamble that I still don't understand. Just this handful of countries alone can make or break US industries, especially when it comes to input costs. So we really shouldn't be concerned about the 100 countries Bessent is referring to. It's these couple of nations that we must focus on. But if you take a step back, it does tell us one clear thing. Trump once again has delayed the tariffs. He basically did a taco and it's not even Tuesday yet. July the 7th should have been the original deadline, but as Bessent mentioned, a ton of countries couldn't be bothered discussing any deal with the US. As such, the deadline is now pushed back to August the 1st. I mean, at this point, things are just getting downright funny. If countries decide to hold firm, want to bet that these deadlines start to shift again? But if you think that is bad, just wait till you get a hold of Trump's next target, right? A new idea. And that target is literally insane. He now wants to take on the whole of BRICS. And I think we are reaching the end game of this tariff war, where reality meets expectations, where countries realize that they can actually survive without doing big business with the US. And because of that, Washington now wants to poke the global south. And I don't think that's a very good idea. Any country aligning themselves with anti-American policies of BRICS will be charged an additional 10% tariff. Now, this is so vague, but also so dangerous at the same time. What do you mean by anti-American policies of BRICS? Does Trump mean de-dollarization? Most probably this means settling trade outside of the dollar. So if Germany decides to do bilateral trade with BRICS and decides to use euros or the RMB, is that now a violation? Will the EU be slapped with an additional 10% tariff? And I think you can see how ridiculous this threat is. It's so expensive that anything BRICS does can be considered anti-American. Trading more with China or Russia can also be a reason. Buying more gold from Shanghai and not US bonds can also be considered anti-American, can't it? You are not financing the US economic machine, and truth be told, Trump does have a reason to be afraid. Now, this chart shows us the nominal GDP of the BRICS versus the G7, and the trend is mighty obvious. Since 2000, the G7 went from 70% of global GDP down to almost just 40%. But for BRICS, we are seeing a big rise in global GDP contribution. By 2029, China alone will contribute 19% to the world. And if we include the rest of the BRICS members beyond Russia or India, the numbers are phenomenal. Almost a third of global economic output will come from the BRICS, and this is counting in the new entrants like Indonesia. Let's not forget a litany of partner countries that will convert into full members sooner or later. So Trump's plan is simply unworkable. If he tries to isolate half of the world economy, he will turn the US into a fortress of isolation. And when that happens, US industries and financial institutions will get cut off. And as trade between the BRICS and China grows, it's going to put Trump and the dollar in a very difficult, in a very tight position. Now, in 2024, trade between China and BRICS alone hit over 4.6 trillion RMB, and that's around $650 billion worth. It's a 5% growth rate during a very difficult period. Now imagine how fast this will grow if Trump decides to punish BRICS or simply roll out his tariff plans this August. An extra 10% alone is incredibly brutal. Now, some of his letters indicate tariff rates of over 50%, as you said earlier, for certain players, and this will just shatter global trade as we know it. Exporters around the world will be forced to redirect exports and find new buyers, and chances are it will be BRICS, most likely China. And what happens when the world decides to trade more with Beijing? Fewer dollars will be used, more bilateral currency settlements will happen, and it doesn't take a genius to see that. The issue here is how the world will also start moving away from dollar assets, and China is the poster child of that. And when you reduce trade with the US, the need for treasury bonds start to go down. And a big shout out to our sponsor today, Indigo Precious Metals. When it comes to buying gold and silver, I trust Indigo Precious Metals in Singapore. They have made investing in precious metals safe, fast, easy, and simple for both small and large-scale buying. I've been stacking gold for over a decade now, and I've learned two things when buying. You want to buy authentic gold bullion, and you want to buy it at the lowest premium possible to stretch your dollars even further. And I'm glad to say I found both of this at Indigo Precious Metals. Indigo Precious Metals is a leading retailer in Singapore. They specialize in physical gold, silver, and platinum. They are my one-stop shop when it comes to buying bullion. Their prices are sharp, and they have the best brands on sale, and I can test the gold on the spot. So if you're looking to make your first gold purchase, Indigo Precious Metals is the best place to start. Whether it's 1 ounce or 1 kilo, this is the reputable dealer you are looking for. So take action today. Click on the link below and enjoy a discount on your first purchase with the code Sean Fu. Start your gold.
Hi, everybody. Today is Sunday, July 6, 2025, and our friend Pepe Escobar from Rio de Janeiro is back with us. Welcome back. Welcome to Brazil, Pepe.
Wonderful to talk to you, Nima, from Brazil. And all of you, our audience, this is the Copacabana Palace swimming pool in the back. This is my office, not that horrible cage that they set up at the Modern Art Museum during BRICS. It's much better to work from here. I get a lot of information, messages, telegram. I can call anybody and all that. And over there, they tell me it's horrible. It's zillions of journalists in a huge cage, and you have access to nothing. So, here's perfect. I just had my lunch here. I have drinks, and people are going to join me later. And it's great to talk to you, Nima, from here, from Rio, and of course, from the first day of the BRICS Summit.
Então, vamos começar com BRICS Summit and the importance of BRICS Summit.
Yes.
I just shifted to Portuguese.
I noticed right away.
To honor BRICS here in Brazil.
Maybe you should come here and we go to the swimming pool together.
Pepe, let's start with what has happened in BRICS. And we know that one of the main concerns on the part of BRICS and BRICS nations is the situation with tariffs. And because the United States, since Donald Trump took office in the United States, and he decided to put tariffs on each and every nation on Earth, on this planet.
Yes.
What is the policy of BRICS? What did they talk about it?
Of course they did. Okay, let me check, because the summit declaration came out, I think 1 hour before our conversation. I haven't read it yet because it's very, very long. But okay, I'll try to summarize for all of you who are following us live. In fact, some of the most important political and geoeconomic points. Very important. BRICS, their own language in the final declaration. BRICS has serious concerns about the rise of unilateral tariffs. Obviously, they would not name the US in a BRICS declaration. They have to proceed very cautiously. But obviously, with the discussions that we had here, with diplomats, delegates, and business representatives from absolutely everywhere, sorry, including the BRICS partners as well, there's got to be a concerted BRICS reaction to the unilateral tariffs. So this is an absolute consensus on BRICS. No particularly particulars yet, how they're going to do that, but at least they are on the same wavelengths. Some other important political points. They condemn the military strikes against Iran. That's not strong enough. What we heard from Iranian diplomats, and I tried to get this from other delegations as well, is that Iran wanted a very, very forceful condemnation. This is not strong enough, Nima, seriously. Just to condemn the military strikes. Well, but we can imagine this was a very, very hardcore discussion, of course. But at least the condemnation is there. Just like the condemnation against the terrorist Ukrainian terrorist act against Bryansk, Kursk. Oh my God. Now they started is it too loud, the sound in the background?
Yeah, no, it's gone right now. I can't hear it.
No. The sound in the background. The band start playing
it comes in, and it's not that much, but
can you hear me at least?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, thank you. Great. So they condemn the attacks on Bryansk and the rail, the bridge and the rail in Kursk as well. Of course, the Russians made the point that this had to be in the final declaration. They welcome Indonesia as a full BRICS member. That's very, very good. And they call for an unconditional Gaza ceasefire, which we were expecting. It's the least they could do. So as you can see, they have to be very generalistic in a summit, in a final declaration. There was a lot of debate on 2 points specifically. One is the condemnation of Israel and Iran for the double war by Israel and US against Iran. But in the end, the Iranians were, let's say, relatively satisfied with the final language. And of course, Russia and China, very forceful on the geoeconomic aspects. If I had to summarize, Nima, so far, what was the most important discussion in this previous 2 days, especially yesterday, was the Business Council meeting. Very, very important. This was really the most important meeting of them all. Much more important than the NTB meeting. The NTB meeting was, to tell you the truth, a bit of a mess. Over 2 days in a huge hotel nearby. Dilma was there, Lula was there the first day, but like our friend Paulo Nogueira Batista, with whom I shared a panel earlier this week here in Rio. So he's one of the co-founders of the NDB. So he can be very critical of the way the NDB works from the inside. And the fact that President Dilma Rousseff now has her second mandate, there's one positive point, which is continuity. And the fact that because she has soft power, her name, her brand, transposed to the NDB adds to the cachet and the swing of the NDB. But that's not enough because they need a structural reform. And so far, considering what they discussed here in Rio this week, I'm not sure this structural reform is coming anytime soon. But the most important thing, which once again I want to go back with all of you, is Siluanov, the Russian Minister of Finance. The Russian delegation, by the way, is the second biggest delegation here. Very, very important. Lots of heavyweights, like executives from Rostec, which basically coordinates the weapons industry in Russia, from Rosatom, nuclear power, from different branches of the government. Sergei Ryabkov, Deputy Foreign Minister, and of course our Grandmaster Lavrov, who was on the table today early this morning with Lula and the other heads of state. Siluanov said something immensely important, which I'll try to quote him verbatim. In fact, let me just find it first. Just a second, all of you. In fact, I wrote a post about it, and I called my post "Bye Bye Swift," because this is what the Russians, as the number one geoeconomic driver of the BRICS agenda, this is what they are striving towards. In fact, Siluanov said, "Okay, I'll give you the number one quote by Siluanov himself."
Pepe.
Yes.
Can you move to some other places that
No,
are
that's the problem. I can't because this thing is very loud, and this is the farthest away that I am from the music. So I'll try to speak very close to the microphone so you can hear me.
Okay.
I know it's terrible. It's Sunday, lots of tourists, so they have to play these things. Okay, very, very important. Siluanov, he's in his own words. The new development bank, NDB, can become BRICS cross-border settlement hub. This is absolutely key because this is a direct, straight to the point, sanction-proof alternative to SWIFT. And the Russians have been testing models about that since last year, way before the Kazan summit, even during the preparation of the Kazan summit. So the NDB, according to Siluanov, they can provide loan guarantees for all sorts of mega infrastructure projects all across the BRICS sphere. It can be in Iran, for instance. It can be in Nigeria. It can be in Indonesia. So then the NDB is going to start to work as a real alternative to the World Bank, which for the moment it's not. The NDB has only 10 members. You cannot have a global bank with only 10 members. So they need to expand, and this is the way to go. Well, very, very important. All the BRICS members, they ratified this move of having the NDB being, let's say, an NDB on steroids, which is what they need at the moment. The next step, technical step, they're going to organize a working group. That's how BRICS works. You have working groups for every issue. And Siluanov said this is just a formality, in fact. So I would say, Nima, that this was the most important geoeconomic development, even considering tomorrow. Tomorrow there's not going to be a lot because the final declaration was already issued less than 2 hours ago. So this is the key. Geoeconomically, BRICS cannot advance without Russia at the driving seat. And at least this is proof. And the fact that they sent an absolutely first-class, ultra-heavy delegation to the summit proves how Russia is taking this all very, very serious. And the fact that this was endorsed by all the BRICS members, it's a very, very good sign.
Russia participated in this summit, sending foreign minister of Russia.
Yes.
And what was the message? It seems that we had a video message from Vladimir Putin.
Yes, Putin. Yes, what Putin said online, let's say Putin on Zoom with Rio or on StreamYard, nothing out of the ordinary. He basically congratulated all the members and the new members and the partners, of course. BRICS is growing. It's already way ahead of this 7. He didn't get into particulars because he knew that his delegation here will be discussing all these particular issues like that. Maxime Overshuk was here, and we talked to him briefly yesterday after the BRICS Business Council. Very, very important. He's one of the top, I would say he's one of the top 3 direct Putin advisors, economic advisors. So it's very, so they took it very, very seriously, Nima and all of our audience. So all this nonsense that you see on a Western mainstream media, I took 5 minutes of my time to take a look at headlines everywhere. Oh, this BRICS summit is not important because Putin and Xi Jinping are not coming. They snubbed the summit. The usual bullshit that you expect from these people, right? And I discussed this with the Chinese. By the way, another huge delegation, and we lots of very, very crucial Chinese academics on the sidelines. We had, for instance, earlier this week, we had one dinner with the people from the Beijing Club, and on the next day we had a closed section at the PUC University here in Rio, one of the best universities in Brazil, with the people from the Beijing Club, intellectuals from Tsinghua University, from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Brazilians, South Africans, and well, and the discussion, Nima, at the highest level. So they sent some of their best academics. Very, very important. And it's very funny when on the sidelines, when we're talking more informally after dinner, for instance, they say, yeah, there were a few reasons why Xi Jinping didn't come. And apparently, the most significant is that all the major issues they had already discussed in person, Xi and Lula, in this previous 2 previous visits by Lula to China. So there was no need for Xi to come here again, you know. And of course, the premier and the Chinese delegation is more than capable to discuss this, and they did. And the meeting between the Chinese premier Li Qiang and Lula, once again, the Chinese saying, look, we will continue to invest all over the place in Brazil, just like we have been doing. Like, you know, the BYD factory in Bahia, for instance, which is enormous. And there are probably going to be many more as well.
Gigantic.
Yeah, as you know, Nima. So commercial trade relations, Brazil, China, they only tend to grow. In parallel with all that, Modi is here because Modi is interested in a strategic partnership with Brazil as well. He doesn't want to be left behind by China. So he brought, once again, an enormous Indian delegation. So India is probably going to start to do serious business in Brazil from now on. We still don't have the details. But the fact that Modi came here, he has a very good relationship with Lula. So there's going to be a lot of, let's say, cross-border investment in Brazil from now on as well. So from a geoeconomic point of view, a trade point of view, a huge success. From a political point of view, even if we don't have some of the top leaders, it doesn't matter. Because BRICS is not only about personal relationships, it's a process. And people like, for instance, these Chinese academics, Orishuk, Silvanov, they understand this very, very well. And the Indians that I talked to at the Business Council yesterday, same thing. The Business Council yesterday was something extraordinary. I was very, very impressed. You could network, Nima and all of you, with literally 60% of the global south. Egyptians, South Africans, Nigerians, everybody was a Vietnam, everybody was a Malaysian. The speech by Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim at the beginning, it was the last speech at the start of the session. Wow, was a killer. Was as good as the one that he gave in Russia last year. Anwar is one of the best diplomats in the world and one of the most capable heads of state in the world. And he said, look, BRICS from now on, he said, we are now going towards beyond cruise velocity. We are really taking off, and then we are picking up speed. And the room was like, people were like, wow. I think many of them have never seen Anwar in person. And he's very good live, you know. So this was excellent. And Lula made a promise, which is was quite stark. And I understand why, and I see an enormous potential. He's going to the ASEAN summit in October in Malaysia, chaired by Malaysia. So this could be the beginning of Brazil and parts of South America much closer trade relationship with with all those powerhouses in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, of course, and Vietnam, which are full members like Indonesia or partners like the others. Western mainstream media. So we need to debunk these people. We were talking about Western mainstream media in one of the media discussions that we had. You know, it's so much stuff. I think it was the day before, 2 days ago, in Niterói, across the bay from here in Rio. And including the possibility of let's try to start working on a project that will be a sort of multimedia, cross-border media, trans-BRICS organization. could be a public-private partnership, how to define who's going to edit all that. But the Global South needs their own media environment and their own sources of information without depending on the global north, and especially the Americans. We discussed a lot big tech, of course, and how they plan to use artificial intelligence to control information even more, single narrative. So, these 3 days before the beginning of the summit, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they were great because we discussed literally everything. And the delegates from everywhere, especially yesterday, where all the business delegates were together yesterday, they were very, very enthusiastic about the possibilities. It's like the beginning of a long road trip, Nima. And you could see that people are really engaged. They have wonderful projects, stuff that I never heard about. They were talking in every possible area, in sustainable development, energy, everything, agriculture, fisheries, you name it. So these are all the positive aspects, which obviously you're not going to see and you're not going to read on Western mainstream media. And you have to be here for it. And the fact that this happened in Rio this year, especially when there were not a lot of high expectations about the summit. This went beyond all expectations. And then we have to go back, of course, to the final declaration, read it in detail, and continue the discussion about, in fact, what the final declaration did not say explicitly, which is the most important part.
Pepe, you mentioned the case of SWIFT system and how they're gonna somehow find a solution for that, and those countries cannot use the SWIFT. But is that going to be a solution in the near future? How do they see it in the future? Is that soon?
It's the beginning of once again, Nima, it's the beginning of a long trip. Silvanov, he did not say emphatically. He said may become the role of the NDB, because he knows that a structural reform to make the NDB much more dynamic and sharp is essential. Dilma herself did not touch on this in detail. We hope maybe to have a private conversation with President Dilma after the end of the summit. And Dilma doesn't like, she always keeps her cards very close to her chest. So I wonder what she will be willing to say about it. But the fact that the Russians and the Chinese trust her at the head of the NDB is already enormous in terms of political capital, and for her to drive this revamping of the NDB. But we can say that compared to last year, they are already the first few steps towards, in the long run, de-dollarization. The BRICS, they need to have their own credit rating system, their own system of payment, settlement, payments, settling payments all across the board. It has to be their own. And they have to use their own currencies more and more, which is something that was part of Putin's speech from online. He emphasized that the road ahead is payments, settlements, and trade in our own currencies. And everybody knows that. It's a mega consensus on BRICS. But everybody also knows that this is a very long process. And they couldn't have, for instance, a final statement here clashing directly with Trump 2.0. Everybody knows that. In the, I would say, the closed door discussions bilaterally, of course, this was, probably was the number one thing. How are we going to react as a group against this tariff dimension by the empire? This was more or less reflected in the final declaration, but in a very subtle way. So now we're going to expect what? More and more cross-border trade in their own currencies, and more integration, transcontinental integration. Once again, that's the importance of this Lula trip in October to ASEAN, to talk to the 10 members of ASEAN who are their main trade partner, guess, is China. Brazil, their main trade partner, is China. So it's logical to have Brazil as a trade giant in South America, integrating more with the Southeast Asians. But once again, Nima, it's and all of you in the audience, it is a very long process. But we have reasons to be cheerful that they discussed this here very, very seriously.
Pepe, what we know about Saudi Arabia? Last time we checked, we don't
Not
know
much.
Did they talk about Saudi Arabia?
No. The Emirates are here. And Saudi Arabia, I didn't see many people from Saudi Arabia, to tell you the truth. There's a huge delegation from the Emirates as well. Saudi Arabia, they remain on the fence. We all know that. They said that they would love to join, but they haven't. So, they participated in some meetings this year, and some they didn't even bother to go. So it's complicated. It's just like Turkey. Turkey received an invitation last year. They didn't respond. And then you go to Erdogan-aligned Turkish media. They said, we want to keep our channels of communication with BRICS open. What channels of communication? You're not even talking. Well,
there's so much unbelievable the
Yes.
behavior of Erdogan and Pepe. But the case of Indonesia is somehow big and important. And I think it's Malaysia, Indonesia. If you bring these nations into BRICS, that would be a game changer. That would be something big to achieve. And how do they know when Indonesia going to join officially BRICS? When they're going to be part of BRICS officially? Or
Indonesia is already a full member, Anima.
But
they were welcomed. Okay, just a second. Let me find it again. They were welcomed officially by everybody as a full member.
Full?
Yes, the other three Southeast Asians, they are partners. Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Vietnam is the latest one. Welcome a few days ago. I think it was early this week, in fact. But Indonesia is a full member. Prabowo is here. Prabowo was one of the top guests here. And this approximation between Brazil and Southeast Asia, this is immensely important. And the bridge was Anwar. And it was great because at the Business Council, the guest of honor, foreign guest of honor, there was only one. Anwar from Malaysia. So this was obviously the Brazilian government said, no, this is our guy, and he is going to introduce us to Southeast Asia. Fantastic. Excellent. Brazil has, of course, good relations with Vietnam, good relations with Thailand, Singapore. But to have a guy of Anwar's stature and introduce Brazilian business people and Southeast Asian business people is invaluable. Let me try to find their official welcome to Indonesia. Just a second. It's part of the official declaration. Declaration, one of the first paragraphs, we welcome Indonesia as a BRICS member. Meaning full BRICS member. Iran, very, very important. There was a lot of blah, blah, blah that the Iranians were blocking the final text of the summit declaration. Bullshit. They wanted the language to be more forceful. And then, of course, they understood that considering this is U.S. and Israel, you have to proceed very diplomatically. The Brazilians were basically telling the Iranians, look, we would like to, but we cannot, because then it will compromise all of us. So in the end, the fact that they condemn the military strikes against Iran is, let's say, halfway, but it's better than nothing, considering the volatility of the situation, right? In many of the discussions, business discussions at the Business Forum and today in some of the speeches, the theme of the empire going out of control was always there, but it was never named. Very, very important. It has to be discreet. And some of the BRICS members, they are excellent diplomatically in dribbling this whole thing. You know, China, Indonesia, Malaysia as a part as well. So it was a clever way of putting it, but they made it very, very clear. We are against all that, and we're going to fight it.
And you mentioned about the unconditional Gaza ceasefire. They're asking for.
Yes, they didn't
Gaza
get into it. Apparently, they didn't get into a lot of details. Lula, for instance, that's complicated. Lula, in his speech this morning, which was the inaugural speech of the opening session, it's the president, the chair, right? Was Lula. He was not forceful enough. He said, as much as we have to condemn what Hamas did, blah, 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 without context. If you say that, you have to provide the context. It's unacceptable. At least he mentioned the word genocide. That's important, because this is what all the other BRICS members and partners agree on. It is a genocide. And Anwar, in his speech yesterday, he explicitly as a genocide. But once again, here on BRICS. End of this.
Pepe, it seems that they're learning as time goes by. They're getting.
And this was another one of the positives here in Rio. Before it started, many of us were very skeptical. Are they going to get deeper into all these geopolitical and geoeconomic issues? Yes, they did. But the leaders' interventions this morning, and what we don't know yet, they had lunch, which probably has finished by now, a long lunch where the rules were you can speak your mind freely, anything you want. And obviously no media, no leaks. So that was great. So they probably had 3 hours to really get deep into all these issues among themselves with, behind closed doors. That's excellent. This is what they need, because considering now that the war by Trump 2.0, finally, I think, they start to see the writing on the wall. It's against all of them. All of BRICS, all of BRICS partners. The empire is against all of them, especially the three ones that we know very well. The three at the top, Russia, China, and Iran. The fact that Arakshi is here, also immensely important, immensely. He was very, very forceful when he had his intervention this morning, obviously condemning in harsh terms the attack against the Iranian nation. Excellent. An enormous soft power problem, Nima, which is disgusting. There was a live feed at the start. So, for instance, we followed Lula's speech live. Okay, of course, there's no media inside the room, right? Then, when Modi started speaking, the live feed vanished and didn't come back. So we couldn't follow live what all of them said. You know, we had snippets afterwards. This is a major tech accusation. Now we have to blame the Brazilian government for that, which, by the way, some of the things, yesterday, the accreditation system for people going to business foreign was a mess, an absolute mess. The meeting of the NTB as well was very, very messy. So they could take the offer. Roscongress in Russia, they are used to organizing these huge summits, especially St. Petersburg and Vladivostok. They offer their services to the Brazilians. The Brazilian says, no, we can do it by ourselves. No, you cannot. You're not competent enough to do it. And we saw, for the past 2 days, we've been seeing this all the time, everywhere. You know, they managed to put 20,000 military in the streets. It's like, Brazil is being invaded by Al Qaeda or whatever. But they cannot organize. So,
It's real, Pepe. It's real.
yeah, it's real, and it's great to talk to. I grew up here as well, so I understand the mentality. I love it, and I talk to a lot of people. And they say, that's how it works, you know. And on top of it, our taxes are paying for all these people. But it's good. It's a relaxed atmosphere. The foreigners who come here, they are like mind blowing. Some of my new African friends, they are mesmerized by Rio, and of course, it's one of the, I would say, it was one of the 2 or 3 top capitals of the global South as a whole. So there is an idea, which is already floating and might be implemented, that Rio could become a sort of capital of global summits, but to make it properly. Like, it would be great because the scenically is fantastic. The first few days was raining. When the sunshine came out yesterday, everybody was like, wow. So it helps to have all these serious discussions in a beautiful setting like this one. It helps a lot. People are automatically energetically driven to find new solutions. And once again, the wonderful aspect of having all these business associations from all over the global South, from Iran, from the Emirates, from Nigeria, from Egypt, etc., and women's chapters of BRICS. BRICS has women's chapters in each individual member state. They all met together with Lula. They had an hour and a half meeting, and some of them told me afterwards that it was immensely productive. And Lula mentioned that in his own speech yesterday. Okay, so he gives a lot of importance for these women's issues at development centers and business women's ideas circulating across the BRICS sphere. So it's great. This democratic, egalitarian component of BRICS you see reflected in everything. You know, it's very uplifting, quite different from how the global North works. In fact.
What was the position on Syria, Pepe? Did they talk about Syria?
Yes, they do. I think I'm gonna have to read it because it's very complicated. Let's find just a second. BRICS on Syria. Okay, I'll try to sum it all up because it's a lot. Well, they reaffirmed the obvious, right? Commitment to sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria, which obviously we know nothing of the above is happening at the moment. Peaceful and inclusive Syrian-led and Syrian-owned UN-facilitated political process. There is no political process in Syria at the moment. as we all know. Everything is still centralized by the former head shopper turned president, self-appointed president, right? They condemned the violence perpetrated on various Syrian provinces, but that's not condemn. Once again, condemn. That's not good enough, right? Bombing of churches, condemn the threat posed by foreign terrorist fighters. Well, that starts with the people supporting the former head shopper, now third president. The greater Itiblistan Salafi jihadi compound in the north. Now they are all over. And some of these people are in ministries in Syria, which is even more absurd. So just condemn them. It's not enough. Risk of spreading of terrorists from Syria to regional countries. That's already happening. They're doing now the back and forth between Syria and Central Asia and the Caucasus as well, because these are front lines against Russia. And obviously, the usual suspects are going to use this Syrian or crypto-Syrians or transported to Syrian Salafi jihadis to wreak havoc in the underbelly of Russia or in other borderlands of Russia, apart from Ukraine. I'm not sure the Russians would have been very satisfied with this language, but I probably was the best that the BRICS could do. You know, they for them, Syria is not a number one priority. For instance, occupation of parts of Syria. They condemned strongly the occupation of parts of Syria. That's also not good enough, right? So what? What are they going to do? Are they going to send a BRICS army over there to dislodge these terrorists? So that was quite disappointing as part of the final declaration. They could have been more forceful. But once again, Nima, if you are more forceful, you have to go to the roots of everything that is happening in Syria. And we all know what that means. Just like if they would be more forceful on what's going on in Ukraine, they will have to do a Lavrov, go to the root causes of the problem. So they opted not to.
Pepe, you've mentioned the Central Asia and the importance of what's going on even in Syria, but how about Azerbaijan? And they used Azerbaijan to attack Iran. And
nobody discussed Azerbaijan as far as I know, Nima, which is a huge problem. If they had to discuss Azerbaijan, they will have to discuss Turkey. And Turkey, they invited Turkey to be a member. Turkey said, we're thinking about it. So they skipped it. They did not talk about Azerbaijan, unfortunately. And I'm sure the Russians were trying to alert the others at the table. Look, you know what Azerbaijan is doing now? They're playing a double game with us. They are opening a front against us in the Southern Caucasus with a very dodgy alliance with Turkey and Israel. This is creating a series of new problems for us. And this is something that we should discuss. In the end, Nima, nothing. Unfortunately. Okay, so I think now our conversation, we are entering into what they did not discuss. They did not discuss a lot of stuff. First of all, because they had their hands full. Second, in terms of international politics, they focused on condemning the attacks on Iran. Obviously, because it's a full member of BRICS. So this has to be condemned in the strongest terms. It was not condemned in the strongest terms. It was just condemned. But that's BRICS, you know, they advance little by little. So the true advances were geoeconomic and trade. Definitely. Geopolitically, they preferred, okay, we have to be very, very careful, especially now with the circus ringmaster running out of control in Washington.
Pepe, we know that Modi, he came to Brazil to participate in the summit. What does he want from? Does he have a clear mind when it comes to the participation to somehow collaboration with other countries within BRICS? And because India is somehow, when you look at their behavior, somehow tricky in the way that they're trying to manage the East and the West. And how was their participation in this summit? How did you find India's role?
We're gonna know better between today and tomorrow, because there's gonna be a huge Brazil-India business roundtable. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's tomorrow, not today. Then we're gonna learn better. What we do know is that Modi wants a strategic partnership with Brazil, not only geopolitically, but especially geoeconomically. But we don't have details yet. And even if you look at Indian media, they are all in awe and in ecstasies because Modi was so well received here in Rio. The fact that they are very good friends, they respect each other. Modi loves Lula, But in practical terms, not so much so far. But this business roundtable, then we're going to have a much better idea.
Yeah. And I don't know why they were somehow hesitant about condemning in a very aggressive, in my opinion, in somehow to condemn it the right way, because two of these nations, as you mentioned, Russia and Iran, are dealing with the conflict.
Exactly.
That one part is the United States together with Israel, United States together with Ukraine. How do they want? Because if something happens between the United States and China in Taiwan, how do there has to be some sort of talks among the nations to see what would be the reaction. Do they have any, are they preparing some sort of document to react the way that they should react?
As far as we know, no. Because geopolitically, I think the consensus among them geopolitically is that they have to be extremely careful at the moment, because it takes an adjective to infuriate the circus ringmaster. So they have to, weigh their language very, very carefully, which is what they did with this final declaration. I would say over the next few months, this might change. Maybe not so much, because the chair of BRICS next year is going to be India. And as we know, Indian-Israel relations are very close. And as we know, the Indian ruling classes haven't made up their minds yet if they want to be part of Eurasia integration or to become a second-rate colony of the Anglo-Americans, more or less like they have been so far. So this is the true issue, and there's no solution for the moment. I wonder if an Indian chairmanship is going to be more effective than the Brazilians. The Brazilians, considering that they worked only, to be fair, they worked only for 5 months for this summit, when the Russians last year worked non-stop for 10. And that's why Kazan was a huge success. But considering the Brazilians only worked for 5, I would say that geoeconomically in trade, it was not so bad what came out here. And the fact that everybody that came here, especially the business people, organizations, etc., that was pretty good. India, we don't know. Really, we don't know, because we don't know their long-term vision of BRICS. If you talk to the Chinese, and the Chinese who know BRICS very well from the start as one of the founding members, some of my new academic friends here, they were saying maybe we should start thinking about the new 2 eyes in BRICS. Sorry, not India, but Iran and Indonesia. And some are even more radical to say we should rename BRICS, but with India and Indonesia and without with Indonesia and Iran and without India. Which goes to the key issue, which is the lack of trust by the Chinese leadership and by the Chinese intellectual community on India. This is an enormous problem, and no one can see how they're going to heal this wound. You know, this visit or this seduction by the G7, bringing Modi and Lula to the latest G7, this went down very badly in Beijing and in Moscow. They're trying diplomatically to, okay, maybe they had to do it, etc., but it was not a good move at all. And adds to their doubts about, okay, where India really stands. Nobody knows. And a lot of people inside India doesn't know. And critics of Modi, they said, of course, he's always hedging. And, you know, there are a lot of corrupt people around him, okay, the usual. But we don't know. We don't have a clear-cut vision on what India wants out of BRICS, like we have coming from China or from Russia or from the Southeast Asians. The Southeast Asians want BRICS as a solid body to help them in this transition towards less dependency of the American market and the American system, towards a system more integrated between them, China, the rest of Eurasia, and the global South as a whole. India and Nima, nobody knows where they're going. Not even themselves, probably.
Pepe, I think that the situation with tariffs is not going to end anytime soon, and Donald Trump would put a lot of pressure on these nations, within BRICS and out of BRICS. But after all, do you find that Donald Trump would somehow back down, or maybe try to connect with BRICS? I think the smart move on the part of the United States would be somehow participating and joining BRICS or doing something together with BRICS. Do you see that?
No, I don't think so. There won't be any sort of synergy between this American administration and BRICS. From the start, the clash was there. And it was announced even before. And the clash that was simmering during the previous administration exploded with the arrival of Trump. Trump already said that BRICS is dead, literally. Okay, he says a lot of stupidities. Sometimes he corrects himself, sometimes he doesn't. But the fact that he actually said that, and the fact that he actually believes it, even though he has no clue whatsoever what BRICS is all about. First of all, because there are no Americans reporting correctly about what's going on here. I saw like 2 or 3 minutes of the Brazilian arm of CNN, and it doesn't even qualify as repulsive. It's beyond stupid. And they are covering. They have reporters here, you know, but they have no idea what's really happening. So this is for the Brazilian fifth column that thinks that CNN is actual journalism. So you can imagine in the US, they have absolutely no clue of what's being debated here and what's behind everything that's being debated here. So we cannot expect any sort of compromise between Trump 2.0 and BRICS, which once again points to how this final declaration had to be so diplomatic. Yeah. Because it's war, Nima. Sorry, this is a frontal war, and I'm glad that the main protagonists of BRICS have this very, very clearly.
Pepe,
Nima, I got
Brazil
In my previous videos, I predicted that Iran would likely be equipped with Chinese fighter jets in the coming months or years. This prediction is grounded in the fact that just days after the US launched Operation Midnight Hammer, top Chinese military officials held key meetings in Beijing, and reports suggest that steps were taken toward acquiring the jets. The J-10C, famously used by Pakistan to outmaneuver India's air force, even when the latter was equipped with the French-made Rafale, proved itself during a brief but intense aerial confrontation. That battle etched the J-10C's reputation as one of the most capable multi-role fighters in the world. Now Iran is looking to strengthen its air defenses with these battle-tested machines, especially amid growing signs that another strike from either Israel or the United States could be imminent.
Russia being reliable or non-reliable as an ally.
This development also follows Russia's refusal to deliver the long-ordered Su-35 jets to Iran, pushing Tehran to diversify its options.
Each conflict is unique. Let me emphasize that Israel has more than 2 million people who came from the former Soviet Union or Russia. In fact, Israel is almost a Russian-speaking country today. And clearly, in our most recent history, we factor this in. Now, traditionally, we've had very good, friendly, and trust-based relations with the Arab world and Islamic world, because about 15% of the population of Russia.
Mark Sloboda disagrees with my assessments on Russia's willingness to supply the jets.
I really hope that in the aftermath of this, we saw this emergency trip of Aragchi to Moscow. He didn't go to Beijing, he went to Moscow. And the Russians, they didn't, there was no transcript, no readout of what happened, but we did have Peskov saying, you know, how can you help the Iranians? What will you do? And his response was, well, that depends on what they ask for, which seemed a fairly expansive. It wasn't quite, we'll give them whatever they want, but there are some people that are, you know, interpreting that way. Maybe it was, we don't know. But I believe that Russia, the Russian government, after the last 5 years, last 10 years, understands that you can't cut deals with the West. You can go through motions, but you can't ever trust them. And hopefully Iran has reached that, but they also need to learn to trust Russia and China. I think that this will become easier if everything is presented as a tripartite, right? Everything is done together. It's not just Iran has to come to an agreement with Russia and depend on and trust Russia, or depend on and trust China. But it all has to be done, the three of them together, right? Mutual defense agreements, strategic agreements, you know, whatever it takes. Because, again, they'll either hang together and survive to found the multipolar world order, or they won't. And we'll have another century of US-led Western global hegemony. That's the game. That is it. And in every other country, you know, North Korea, Syria's gone now. You know, they're bit players on the scene for various, you know, resources, capability, foundations of geopolitical strategy reasons or political will.
While I disagree with Sloboda's assessments here over Russia's apparent dragging of its feet to aid an ally, recall that for years, Iran has been flying outdated aircraft like the F-4 Phantom, MiG-29, and Su-24, many of which date back to the 1970s and 1980s. These aging platforms simply can't compete with Israel's modern stealth-enabled fleet of F-35I Adir and F-16I Superjets. That's why the J-10C isn't just another addition to Iran's arsenal. It could be a game changer. Let me breaking things down further. The J-10C is a fourth-generation plus multi-role fighter designed for both air superiority and strike missions. What sets it apart from older fighters is its integration of advanced avionics, radar systems, and weapons technology. The jet features an active electronically scanned array, AESA radar, comparable to those found in top-tier Western and Israeli jets, giving it the ability to detect, track, and engage multiple targets simultaneously at long range. It also supports radar cross-section reduction techniques, improving its survivability in contested environments. The J-10C can carry a wide array of weapons, including long-range air-to-air missiles like the PL-15, which has an estimated range of up to 300 kilometers, posing a direct threat to Israeli aircraft operating from a distance.
You see, Iran has been preparing for this conflict since 2005, 2006. You know, the United States made it clear after 9/11, and there's the famous quotation of General Wesley Clark, the former commander of U.S. forces in Europe, who said he was in a meeting with Paul Wolfowitz where they talked about 7 nations being overthrown by the United States. Iran was number 7 on that list. And in 2005, 2006, the United States government, George W. Bush, with Dick Cheney, the vice president, looming in the background, was saying, we're going to move on Iran. And Iran took that seriously. Many people forgot that in March of 2006, Iran shut its nation down, fearing an imminent American attack. And they divided their nation into 57 military districts, each of one of which was supposed to be organized to survive 2 years independently in case of an invasion and occupation. And Iran has been preparing ever since that time for 20 years to fight the very war that took place over the course of those 12 days. So it's not as though Iran was defenseless. Iran had a plan. They had a strategy. They were ready for this conflict. They weren't ready for a surprise attack. Nobody ever is. And the Israelis had prepared a hell of a surprise attack. There's a saying, no plan survives initial contact with the enemy. The Iranians had a plan, but when it came time for the war with Israel, that plan didn't survive. Iran had to adapt, and adapt they did. And for 12 days, Iran carried out a retaliatory campaign that brought Israel to its knees, that compelled Israel to make a phone call to the United States begging for the United States to facilitate a ceasefire. So Iran did not lose this war. Iran may not have won this war in the traditional sense of the word, but Iran certainly defended itself adequately. So now we come back to these armchair generals and these armchair warriors trying to find blame. There is no blame. War is hellish business. People die, equipment is destroyed. It never ends the way people thought it would end. And now Iran's in the business of reevaluating, reassessing what it can do, what it can't do, what might happen. They're creating another plan. But be rest assured that if, and indeed when, Israel and Iran go back to war, whatever plan Iran is developing at this moment in time won't survive the first day. Iran will have to adapt. They will have to find alternative mechanisms moving forward, as all militaries do. This is the natural state of event. It doesn't mean the Iranians were ill-prepared, and it damn sure doesn't mean the Russians betrayed Iran. And now look, Iran has sent a delegation to China. And I'm sure whatever happens, there will be people who say, well, the Chinese now have betrayed Iran. No, nobody's betraying anybody.
Now, in a hypothetical battle between Iranian J-10Cs and Israeli jets, the playing field becomes a lot less one-sided than it currently is. While Israel's F-35I Adir enjoys stealth capabilities that the J-10C lacks, the Chinese jet can still pose a serious threat, especially in coordinated defense scenarios using ground-based radar and missile systems like Iran's Bavar 373 or Russian-supplied S-300s. Additionally, the PL-15 missile gives the J-10C a beyond visual range edge that even Israeli pilots have to respect. The Israeli Air Force depends heavily on electronic warfare and real-time satellite intelligence provided by the US. But if Iran manages to integrate J-10Cs with its domestically developed air defense networks and Chinese satellite navigation systems, like Beidou, it can reduce Israel's advantage in long-range targeting and surveillance. In close combat, the J-10C's agility and powerful onboard sensors give it a fighting chance against the F-16I Sufa, which is the backbone of Israel's airstrike capability. Unlike the Sufa, which has logged thousands of combat hours and is tailored for deep penetration strike missions, the J-10C's strength lies in intercepting threats before they get close and defending Iran's skies. If Iran deploys the jets smartly, positioned in hardened air bases, operating under integrated air defense coverage, and supported by early warning drones and radar systems, it could severely complicate Israel's calculus for launching future airstrikes. The Chinese Baidu system already posed a serious challenge to Israel in the 12-day war, and we might see an increase such possibilities if Iran integrates more into the Chinese military ecosystem.
Let's assume that Russia was already beginning the process of building an air defense network for Iran, and that's not the case at all. And he went in further that Russia had offered Iran a mutual defense pact, like with what they signed with North Korea, and Iran said, thank you, but no thank you. And that Russia had also offered and/or coordination on air defense, right? A joint air defense production so that air defense interceptors would even be made as well in Iran, and that Russia would help them build a multi-layered integrated air defense and EW network, and that they would even be hooked up into Russia's own satellite and radar air defense, warning system. And they said, no, thanks, but no thanks. And apparently the reason for this, what we're being told, and I haven't seen it denied by the Iranians at all, is that this was because the Iranian government, again, supposedly, and it makes a degree of sense, Pezeshkian, right, the so-called reformist who ran on a campaign naive as F of placating and improving relations with the West, so that makes a certain amount of sense, that they believed that militarily aligning themselves with Russia, well, Russia was already in a proxy come direct war with the US and NATO in Ukraine, would ruin any chances of Iran improving relations with the West. And get this, might even lead to direct conflict between Iran and the United States. So, I'm sorry, Picard epic double face bomb, right? That's the only reaction. Now, Iran is a prickly nation, all right? They've got a millennia of history, right, behind them as a civilization, that they've got their pride, their sovereignty, and there's some bad history.
The recent India-Pakistan aerial clashes of May 2025 offer a powerful case study that Iran is watching very closely. During the May conflict, Pakistan deployed its newly acquired J-10C jets against Indian forces, and the results were staggering. According to several international assessments, at least 2, and possibly up to 6, Indian jets, including advanced platforms like the Rafale and Su-30 MKI, were shot down in what may have been the largest beyond visual range BVR air engagement in modern history. These kills were reportedly achieved using China's powerful PL-15 air-to-air missile, fired from the J-10C. For Iran, which faces the very real threat of Israeli or American airstrikes, this kind of proven performance in a high-intensity scenario is invaluable. The loss of Indian Rafales and Su-30s, jets considered to be some of the most capable in Asia, sent shockwaves through the region, but it also sent a loud message to Tehran. Chinese jets can perform. Pakistan's integration of the J-10C with its radar networks and missile command structures demonstrated what a well-orchestrated defense system could achieve against even high-end Western aircraft. For Iran, which has long suffered from an outdated fleet of aging US and Soviet-era jets, the opportunity to acquire a modern combat-proven platform is critical, especially now when tensions with Israel are at an all-time high. Kindly support independent journalism by subscribing to the channel.
Sukhoi Su-34 fighter jet is not just an ordinary fighter, it is a flying command center of the Russian aerospace forces, designed for modern warfare, can be equipped with various variants of the FAB glide bombs that the enemy fears, dominating the skies of Ukraine around the clock. In the last 2 days, especially during long-range missions and sorties, it was shown how the bomb thrown by the multifunctional supersonic bomber rocked targets in Kryvyi Rih and Kupiansk, bypassing most of Ukrainian air defenses from Western clubs. The attack was carried out using precision-guided bombs, following predetermined coordinates. While in the air, the pilot showed the simultaneous dropping of 4 FAB aerial bombs with the UMPK system, which will explode powerfully on enemy targets. The footage of the FAB being dropped not only shows how successful it is, but also makes it hit the target accurately. Footage of the work on July 4th shows how the Su-34 long-range strike on targets in Kryvyi Rih, Dnipropetrovsk region. The Eastern Ukrainian Air Defense Command announced that the FAB 1500 bomb, dropped from the bomber, flew more than 100 kilometers into Ukrainian territory, exploding the target. It was noted that a large fire broke out at the bomb's landing site, spreading to the surrounding area and critically damaging the enemy's infrastructure. Ukrainian media admitted that there was an acute shortage of air defense systems and missiles for them, which had a significant impact on Ukraine's defense capabilities. Meanwhile, another airstrike on July 5th hit a temporary deployment point of the armed forces of Ukraine on the outskirts of the city of Kupiansk in the southern group's area of responsibility. This time, a large explosion from the FAB 500 destroyed the enemy's accumulated reserves, which were preparing for a counterattack. After receiving intelligence confirmation of the successful destruction of the targets, the aircraft crew returned safely to their airfield.
A few hours ago, amid the US refusal to resume financial and military assistance to Ukraine, the head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelensky, held an emergency meeting with his generals and ministers. During this meeting, this political clown admitted that during a telephone conversation with Donald Trump, the US president actually notified him that the White House was withdrawing from the current conflict. "He didn't promise me anything. Donald Trump only said that the war in Ukraine should end as soon as possible. He is no longer interested in the issue of supporting Ukraine and further confrontation with Russia," Volodymyr Zelensky said. Furthermore, this dead man walking also admitted that the Ukrainian army has very few missiles left for air defense and MLRS systems. Later, the Ukrainian military department confirmed that if the United States does not resume the supply of weapons to Kiev, the remaining stocks of anti-aircraft missiles will last only for 18 days. As for the MLRS missiles, their stocks will only last for 10 days. At the same time, the Ukrainian military department recognizes that all these remaining stocks of US missiles may run out much earlier if Russia increases the intensity of its strikes on Ukraine. The head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, also made a rather shocking statement. In particular, on July 6, he officially confirmed that the United States had actually completely withdrawn from the current conflict. According to him, the United States has left Ukraine and Europe one-on-one with Russia. At the same time, Andriy Yermak admitted that European countries, including Britain, are unable to provide Ukraine with the necessary types of weapons. The head of the office of the President of Ukraine notes that although Britain, France, and Germany have already announced they will continue purchasing all necessary weapons from the United States for further transfer to Kiev, the Trump administration has not yet approved such a deal. Against this background, former Verkhovna Rada deputy Igor Mozychuk stated that the Kiev regime, led by Volodymyr Zelensky, has started to develop a plan to escape from Kiev to western Ukraine. According to him, on June 30, 2025, Volodymyr Zelensky ordered the evacuation of all ministries and government institutions to the city of Lviv. As evidence, he showed the relevant document of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. This document says that all government agencies of the country should open their reserve offices in the city of Lviv. Regrettably for Zelensky, this document was leaked in open access after the presidential office staff made a horrible mistake. They forgot to mark this document as confidential. As a result, Ukrainian officials began sharing this document among themselves. Thus, as you can see, against the backdrop of the Russian army's successful advance on the battlefield, the Kiev regime is preparing to flee to Lviv, leaving Ukrainian citizens to deal with the consequences of Zelensky's stupid decisions. By the way, over the past 24 hours, the Russian army has achieved another success in the Special Military Operations Zone. In particular, on the morning of July 7, war correspondents confirmed the liberation of the settlements of Tolstoy and Podobnoy in Velikaya Novoselka direction of the front. According to war correspondents, after the liberation of these settlements, Russian troops have already begun to storm Novokatskoy and Myrnoy. Over the past 24 hours, the Russian army has also achieved another success in Kupiansk direction of the front. In particular, on July 6, units of the groups of troops under the designation Zapad completely liberated the settlement of Sobolevka to the west of Kupiansk. Thus, the Russian army continues to cover Kupiansk from the western side, cutting off this strategically important city from supplies. All this indicates that Russian troops refuse to make frontal attacks on Kupiansk. Instead, the Russian army is gradually encircling Kupiansk from all sides, forcing the Ukrainian army's units to leave the city. Meanwhile, on the evening of July 6, amid the Ukrainian army's rapidly deteriorating position on the battlefield, the Kiev regime and its so-called allies from NATO countries launched another attempt to destroy the Crimean Bridge. It is reported that on July 6, at 7 p.m. Moscow time, a special security regime was introduced on the Crimean Bridge. All traffic on the bridge was halted, and all roads leading to this transportation facility were closed. According to witnesses, this special security regime lasts for almost 2 hours. Later, the Russian Defense Ministry officially announced that Ukraine, with the help of kamikaze drones and cruise missiles, launched a combined attack on the Crimean Bridge. It is reliably known that during this attack, the Ukrainian army and NATO forces used about 50 kamikaze drones and 15 units of British low-observable Storm Shadow cruise missiles. And, unfortunately for the Kiev regime and its Western masters, this attack on the Crimean Bridge once again proved to be a failure. Russian air defense systems shot down all enemy cruise missiles and drones. 2 hours after this missile attack, traffic on the Crimean Bridge resumed. It is worth noting that on the morning of July 7, the first details of this missile attack on the Crimean Bridge appeared. Sources within the Russian military confirmed that all enemy cruise missiles were intercepted with the advanced 5th-generation S-500 Prometheus air defense system. As for the enemy kamikaze drones, they were intercepted with the Pantsir S-1M air defense systems. Furthermore, sources in the Russian military department admitted that the Russian army uses S-500 systems not only in the Crimean Peninsula area, but also in other areas of the Special Military Operation Zone. My dear truth seekers, let me remind you that in June 2022, Vladimir Putin acknowledged for the first time that the Russian army was using the world's most advanced air defense system, S-500 Prometheus, in a special military operation zone. Later, in December 2023, Chinese military experts from the reputable publication Sohu reported that the newest Russian S-500 system destroyed 30 enemy aircraft at a distance of 600 kilometers, within just 1 week of deployment in Ukraine, establishing a world record. Given the fact that the S-500 is the world's only system capable of destroying hypersonic missiles, it is safe to assume that the Russian army has indeed received an ultimate weapon at its disposal.
Coffee. Follow me.